Chapter 1096. The Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin thought so and disagreed with Ma Chenye's words. He didn't know that it was impossible to avenge Su Deheng and Shen Qiuyue. But it was entirely possible to avenge the treasure that even the gold-seeking hamster was excited about. Come! The Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin said in a deep voice. Go to the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin and capture the student named Luo Qingtong. Ask her to hand over the treasure of the Celestial Palace and the gold-seeking hamster. Father! The voice of the Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin sounded. Ma Chenye's voice suddenly sounded. The Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin didn't even pay attention to him. Ma Chenye had no choice but to sit there and wait anxiously. He only hoped that Su Deheng and the others were talking nonsense. In this way, after Luo Qingtong was captured and brought to the palace, he could still exonerate her. At that time, with her identity as the Princess of Great Chu, she would be fine. That's right. And the Grand Dean. He must know about this matter and let him come with the Grand Tutor to support Luo Qingtong. Thinking so, Ma Chenye immediately winked at the people around him. Immediately, some of his trusted aides left the room and went to look for the Grand Principal and the others. Su Deheng and Shen Qiuyue had been paying attention to Ma Chenye's movements. Seeing these movements around him, they suddenly sneered. The smile on their lips was very gloomy and proud. Luo Qingtong was definitely doomed this time. The more the Grand Dean and the others stood up for her, the better. At that time, they could catch all of them in one fell swoop and avenge their previous hatred. Let them help Luo Qingtong. At that time, none of them would be able to escape. The group of people was very calm and composed. Luo Qingtong went back to the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin after burying the fake things. In the courtyard, Yu Qingwei was waiting for Luo Qingtong. Su Xiaoxiao and the others were chatting with her. Ever since the incident at the Elder Conference, the relationship between the Qingwei group and the Heavenly Demon group had been completely reconciled. Su Xiaoxiao and the others were grateful to Yu Qingwei for bringing the Qingwei group to help. Although they weren't able to help in the end, they didn't have any prejudice against them. The group of people got along very well. As for Yu Qingwei, Su Xiaoxiao and the others quite liked her. This was especially true for Su Xiaoxiao. As a member of the pharmaceutical department, she liked to interact with Yu Qingwei. The two of them didn't take the usual path when it came to alchemy, so they had a lot to talk about when they were together. But today, Yu Qingwei almost didn't speak. Not only that, she kept anxiously asking Luo Qingtong where she was, asking her to come out because she had something urgent to tell her. Boss has gone out. Su Xiaoxiao and the others looked at her and said. Seeing Yu Qingwei's restless appearance, they seemed to have sensed something and immediately said, Senior Sister Qingwei, why are you looking for boss? If there's anything, you can also tell us. The group said. That's right. Senior Sister Qingwei, is there something that you don't want to talk about? Just say it. That's right. Boss just went out and no one knows when she'll be back. If there's something urgent, you can tell us first. Yu Qingwei looked at them and didn't know what to say. She just received news from Ma Chenye. The latter thought about it and decided to let Luo Qingtong leave first. The Celestial Palace's people came aggressively and were probably prepared. Even if Luo Qingtong really didn't take their treasure, they wouldn't let it go. Chapter 1097. He had Yu Qingwei send a message to Luo Qingtong in order to not attract attention. After all, in the eyes of many people, even if the two of them had let go of their former enmity, their relationship wouldn't be that good. It was just a pretense. If the Grand Principal sent a message or Ma Chenye sent it himself, Luo Qingtong would probably be stopped before she could leave the Empire of Qin's holy courtyard. However, who would have thought that Luo Qingtong wasn't in the Empire of Qin's holy courtyard at this time? Unable to tell Luo Qingtong this news, Yu Qingwei couldn't sit still. At this time, Luo Qingtong returned. Senior Sister Qingwei? She saw Yu Qingwei surrounded by Su Xiaoxiao and the others in the pavilion and wanted to ask her what was going on. The latter also anxiously stood up and wanted to tell her what happened in the Empire of Qin's imperial palace. However, at this time, a clamor suddenly sounded from outside. Luo Qingtong? Where's Luo Qingtong? Who's Luo Qingtong? Yu Qingwei's expression suddenly changed when she heard the series of shouts. Damn it! The Sage Emperor sent people. She hurriedly said to Luo Qingtong, Junior Sister Luo, quickly leave. The Celestial Palace's people found the Sage Emperor and said you took their treasure. They're going to capture you now. The situation was urgent, so Yu Qingwei couldn't explain to Luo Qingtong what the Celestial Palace was and why the other party went to the Sage Emperor and said she took their treasure. However, Luo Qingtong immediately understood. The gold-seeking hamster's master came. She narrowed her eyes and said to Little Pig in her mind. Apart from this reason, she couldn't think of any other reason why the other party said she took their treasure. Did they know she had a treasure in her hands? Perhaps the gold-seeking hamster's strange behavior was caused by them. They were nearby at that time? However, the Celestial Palace. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows. She suddenly remembered that Su Deheng's wife was an external deacon of a mysterious sect. Could it be this Celestial Palace? As she thought of this, she immediately connected the dots. Just as Yu Qingwei's voice fell, a group of people barged in from outside. Miss Yu is wrong. She's not going anywhere today. After hearing Yu Qingwei's words clearly, the commander of the internal guards who had been ordered to capture Luo Qingtong suddenly gestured towards Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong, by order of the Sage Emperor, you are invited to the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin. Please don't make things difficult for us. When the commander of the internal guards left the Imperial Palace, he was warned by Ma Chenye's men to not disrespect Luo Qingtong. Mo Chen Xian was already deposed. If there were no accidents, Ma Chenye would be the future ruler of the Empire of Qin. Under such circumstances, the commander of the internal guards was still very willing to do the crown prince a favor. Therefore, he didn't immediately attack Luo Qingtong. However, he didn't know that Ma Chenye's words had actually saved their lives. If they dared to attack Luo Qingtong, they wouldn't end up any better than those people from the Sacred Academy's law enforcement team. Okay, I'll go with you. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes at them, then nodded and walked out with them. Boss! Su Xiaoxiao and the others only just recovered from their shock and almost chased after them. However, this time was different from when they went to the Elders Guild. The soldiers of the Imperial Guards didn't allow them to follow. What should we do? Chapter 1098. Bastards! What the hell is that Celestial Palace? Why are they targeting Boss? Is there something wrong with their brains? Our boss wants to steal their treasure? How shameless! Yuan, who is so angry that he punches the stone pillar next to him. Boss is the evil Dr. Ghost Eye. What treasure doesn't she have? That underworld venerable in the Black Field can't wait to give her the entire Black Field. Moreover, even if the Black Field doesn't have a treasure, Boss won't even bother to steal or snatch it. These people are too much. This is a false accusation. It is a false accusation, Yu Qingwei says. She bites her lip. In the end, she didn't make it in time. She doesn't know if anything will happen to Luo Qingtong. Celestial Palace is a very powerful sect from the hidden world. The one who came this time is their outer sect elder, a saint transcendence expert. He said that Qingtong took his treasure. No one would doubt it. And the Celestial Palace they're in is the sect where Su Deheng's wife, Shen Chuiyue, is in. Yuan Hu and the rest instantly understand after hearing Yu Qingwei's words. F***CK. If that's the case, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for them to frame Boss? No. Boss is in danger. The group of people immediately react. If that person from Celestial Palace was really called by Shen Chuiyue to deal with Luo Qingtong, then this time, saying that Luo Qingtong took their treasure is completely a conspiracy. No matter whether Luo Qingtong admits it or not, they won't let her off. Not good. The group of people instantly panics. Especially when they think that the outer sect elder from Celestial Palace is actually a saint transcendence expert. They panic even more. Quick! Let's go to the Black Field and inform the people in the Black Field that Boss is in danger. As they speak, they stomp their feet and are about to run out. It's useless. Yu Qingwei looked at them and shook her head. Even if Luo Qingtong and the Black Field's evil Dr. Ghost I have a good relationship, the latter may not be able to protect her. That's a transcendent saint we're talking about. Unless we can invite someone like Ming Zun from the Black Field, only then would we be able to fight against him. But why would such a person fight against a transcendent saint for Luo Qingtong? Even if evil Dr. Gui Tong personally begs him, I'm afraid it's still impossible. Moreover, behind that Elder Xie is the Celestial Palace. Yu Qingwei analyzed seriously with Su Xiaoxiao and the others. She wasn't trying to dampen their enthusiasm and confidence. But it was true. Ordinary people simply wouldn't go against a transcendent saint or even the sect behind the other party for a student like Luo Qingtong. In truth, the sage emperor might have known that Luo Qingtong was innocent. But between a student and a transcendent saint, or even the celestial palace, who was more important? Naturally, it was the latter. That's why the sage emperor sent people to capture Luo Qingtong after listening to Elder Xie's side of the story. No, you're wrong. Su Xiaoxiao shook off Yu Qingwei's hand. She looked at her seriously and said word by word, "Senior Sister Qingwei, you don't know what will happen if something happens to our boss. Not to mention Elder Xie, Celestial Palace, even your entire the Empire of Qin Dynasty will have to use blood to wash away the anger of the Black Field. Or it could be said that the anger of the Black Field's Ming Zun." Those who had seen how much Yi Qianxian cared about Luo Qingtong wouldn't doubt that the Black Field's Ming Zun would go to that extent for her. If something happened to Luo Qingtong, the world would be buried with her. Chapter 1099. Yu Qingwei was startled by her words, but before she could react, Su Xiaoxiao had already waved her hand away. Seeing them leave without looking back, Yu Qingwei's mind kept replaying Su Xiaoxiao's words. If something happened to Luo Qingtong, the entire the Empire of Qin Holy Dynasty and Celestial Palace would have to use blood to wash away the Black Field's anger? How much confidence did she have to be able to say something like that? And Su Xiaoxiao and the others were clearly only people from the Empire of Tianyu. How could they say something like that? What's more, Luo Qingtong was only a young girl from a marquee mansion from a low-level country. Even if Yu Qingwei never judged people based on their appearance or status, she couldn't deny the fact that Luo Qingtong came from a lowly background. The only thing Luo Qingtong could rely on was that she knew evil Dr. Gui Tong and had a relationship with her. But having a relationship didn't mean they would protect her unconditionally. Knowing her didn't mean the Black Field would protect her. Did Su Xiaoxiao and the others think Luo Qingtong was that evil Dr. Gui Tong? Only that evil Dr. Gui Tong would be able to obtain the full protection of the Black Field and the Black Field's underworld venerate in exchange for the destruction of the Celestial Palace and the Empire of Qin Holy Dynasty. Thinking up to here, Yu Qingwei suddenly froze. Luo Qingtong. Evil Dr. Gui Tong? Information about both sides suddenly flashed through her mind uncontrollably. Luo Qingtong came from a low-level country, Dongli Country. Evil Dr. Gui Tong rose from a Black Field branch city in Dongli Country. Evil Dr. Gui Tong's medical skills were unparalleled, his alchemy skills were superb, and his alchemy skills were top-notch. And when the Qingwei group was dealing with the Heavenly Demon group, a mysterious honorary lead pharmacist suddenly appeared. He obtained the approval of the Grand Master and the Grand Principal of the pharmacist group, defeated her in a challenge, and refined a real pill elixir. The elixir aura contained within the elixir liquid was incomparably dense, and it was no different from a real elixir. Thinking of this, Yu Qingwei immediately sucked in a deep breath. The things that he had never thought of before were instantly dispelled by Su Xiaoxiao's words. Luo Qingtong was the evil Dr. Ghost Eye. This was the evil Dr. Ghost pupil who had caused the Black Field's deep revered to fall in love with her and protect her wholeheartedly. He had even said that no one in the entire True Spill continent would be able to harm her. That was why evil Dr. Gui Tong was so protective of the Luo clan. That was why he destroyed Tianyu's royal family for the Luo clan. It was only when the Qingwei group was dealing with the Heavenly Demon group that the honorary lead disciple of the mystic pharmacy suddenly appeared. If it was the evil Dr. Ghost Eye, then it was no wonder that the Medicine Institute's great teacher and grand principal would make her the honorary chief without any hesitation. Not to mention, no one could surpass her position in the Medicine Institute. How could he surpass it? The other party was already an alchemist. Moreover, his alchemy skills had reached the acme of perfection. Even those old monsters did not dare to say that they could compare to him. As Yu Qingwei thought of this, she realized just how great this matter was. If Luo Qingtong really was the evil Dr. Ghost Eye, then the Celestial Palace and the Empire of Qin's Holy Dynasty would be in deep trouble. Thinking of the anger of the Black Field's deep revered, she fiercely shivered. The Empire of Qin's Imperial Palace. Luo Qingtong was accompanied by the Imperial Palace's internal guards who had come to invite her into the Grand Discussion Hall. In order to express the importance of this matter, the Empire of Qin's Holy Emperor had changed the location of the interrogation from the Imperial Study to the Grand Discussion Hall. The imperial palace's inner courtyard was heavily guarded. Wherever they passed, sabers, spears, swords, and halberds would shoot out cold light in all directions. Chapter 1100. Luo Qingtong, you didn't think you'd have such a day, did you? The two men's expressions were cold as they mouthed Luo Qingtong. Their murderous intent towards Luo Qingtong was evident as they opened and closed their mouths. Today, they wanted Luo Qingtong to never be able to walk out of this door. As for Elder Xie, a trace of amazement flashed through his eyes as he looked at the stunning young girl who walked in. He didn't think that this student, whom Su Deheng and Shen Qiuyue hated to the bone, would be so stunning. If she could obediently hand over the treasures on her body, it wasn't like he couldn't keep her and play with her by his side. Presumably, she would be very happy to do so. After all, this was an honor that many people couldn't even ask for. Seeing his gaze, the little pig in Luo Qingtong's arms snorted and said, "Hey, woman, that Elder Xie seems to have taken a fancy to you. Oh my God." With a face full of wrinkles, he still wants to learn from others and eat young grass. Hearing its words, Luo Qingtong glanced indifferently at Elder Xie and didn't say anything. On the other side, Ma Chunyi had already stood up. Qingtong. Grand Tutor Jiang and the Grand Principal stood beside him. It was obvious that the two of them had been called over by Ma Chunyi. Luo Qingtong had just learned about Ma Chunye's painstaking efforts from Yu Qingwei and immediately nodded towards him. It was said that true hearts were revealed in adversity. It was indeed so. When the Celestial Palace made things difficult for her, not only did Ma Chunyi not retreat, but he did his best to help her. It could be said that he didn't let her down for her previous help. She really didn't misjudge him. Qingtong. Ma Chunye's heart was anxious. He didn't think that Luo Qingtong would appear here. Didn't he ask Yu Qingwei to inform her to leave? Could it be that something went wrong? When the Grand Principal saw Luo Qingtong's arrival, he frowned fiercely and transmitted a message to her. "Luo girl, this matter is not easy to handle. That Elder Xie has the strength of a Saint Transcendence and is considered a powerhouse among the ordinary Saint Transcendents. I think you'd better reveal your identity so that they won't dare to touch you." His expression was dignified. To the Grand Principal naturally hoped that Luo Qingtong's identity wouldn't be exposed so quickly. This way, they would have one more trump card in the Saint Court. But this situation was different. The Celestial Palace was be considered to be a big sect in the hidden world. As Elder Xie B. TSSS, SSSSST, SSS have a S. After all. He wasn't a true Saint Transcendence. His was only slightly above the Saint realms. In addition, he had been injured these years, which delayed his advancement. If nothing unexpected happened, his would have been. There was absolutely no possibility of a breakthrough. Under such circumstances, even if he tried his best, he wouldn't be able to stop the other party. Luo Qingtong was invited by him to the Empire of Qin's Saint Court. If something happened here, not to mention Ming Zun's anger, even he would feel sorry for Luo Qingtong. No need, Grand Principal. You don't have to say any more. It's too late. Chapter 1101. If the people from Celestial Palace had come specifically to avenge Su Deheng and Shen Qiuyue, it would be fine. If she revealed her identity, they would absolutely not dare to make a move. But they had come for the treasures on her body. Even if she revealed her identity, the other party would definitely force her to hand over the little golden mouse. But that gold-seeking mouse had already known the secret of the treasures on her body. In any case, Luo Qingtong would not return it to the people from Celestial Palace. Otherwise, under the investigation of the secret method, the other party would definitely discover the secret of the life and death yin-yang sword and the 9-layered exquisite pagoda. Under such circumstances, the enmity between Luo Qingtong and Elder Xie was set. Rather than letting them get the little golden mouse and leave in fear, which would attract the powerful people from Celestial Palace, it was better to continue to hide her identity and deal with their moves as they came. The best result would be to make Elder Xie and his party stay here completely, so that the people from Celestial Palace would not know what had happened. In this way, the secret of the treasures on her body would not be exposed. Luo Qingtong thought so and narrowed her eyes. She already had a plan in mind. But the specific implementation was still a little difficult. But now she had no other choice. Luo Qingtong. The Grand Dean did not understand Luo Qingtong's words and did not know what she meant by "it's too late." When he wanted to ask for more details, Shen Chouyue on the other side could not help but launch an attack. Previously, she had let this woman, who had dealt with her daughter and humiliated her husband, escape. This time, she would like to see how she could escape. Shen Chouyue's eyes glinted coldly. She suddenly stood up with a stern shout. "You abducted my sex-treasured beast and stole my sex treasures. Quickly hand over all those things and return my sex-treasured beast. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude to you." Su Deheng was also here. While pretending to comfort Shen Chouyue, he said to Luo Qingtong with a strong sense of righteousness, "Luo Qingtong, I know you have a grudge with my family. You hate my disciple Yu Wenma for abandoning you. Jin Yue is not sensible. Because she loves Amoer, she offended you many times. But in any case, you can't do such a disgraceful thing to the Celestial Academy when my wife returns home." He raised his voice. "Gold-seeking mouse is the sex-treasured beast of the Celestial Palace. Not everyone can get it. Even if you get it, you can't afford it. What's more, there are all kinds of treasures from Celestial Palace." "The Empire of," he said Grand Dean to the Celestial Academy, "and Holy Dynasty of the Empire Dynasty of the Empire. Once you provoke the Celestial Palace, I don't know how many lives you have to pay for it. Holy Emperor, please judge clearly." Su Deheng suddenly turned around and bowed to the Holy Emperor of the Empire of Qin, who was sitting at the top of the hall. Every word he said was closely related to the fact that Luo Qingtong had a grudge against them. So she deliberately lured away the gold-seeking mouse and caused the Celestial Palace's treasures to be stolen. His words were reasonable, and the people in the hall began to believe him. Even Ma Chenyi couldn't help but glance at Luo Qingtong. He wondered if Su Deheng had some conspiracy that Luo Qingtong found out, so she deliberately lured away the gold-seeking mouse to vent her anger. But he didn't expect that the gold-seeking mouse was the sex-treasured beast of the Celestial Palace, and there were treasures of the Celestial Palace on it. So, no. Chapter 1102. Let's not talk about whether or not Luo Qingtong was such a careless person. She was discovered by Su Deheng and the others when she lured away the gold-seeking hamster. Let's say that the gold-seeking hamster and the sex treasures were stolen together. Given the grudge between Su Deheng and Luo Qingtong, as well as Elder Xie's strength, how could they not snatch those things back on the spot? Thinking like this, Ma Chenyi's heart suddenly trembled. He immediately realized that it wasn't that Elder Xie and the others didn't want to snatch it, but that they couldn't. It was true that the gold-seeking hamster had gone missing, and it was most likely on Luo Qingtong's body. However, those stolen treasures were most likely all fake. The gold-seeking hamster had gone missing because it had discovered the treasures on Luo Qingtong's body. Elder Xie and the others had deliberately come to complain. They wanted to borrow Imperial Father's hand to force Luo Qingtong to take out the treasures on her body. After all, the Holy Court of the Empire of Qin had a protective formation. Luo Qingtong was among them. If Elder Xie and the others made a move and the Grand Dean defended Luo Qingtong, there was still a possibility that Luo Qingtong would escape. However, it was different in this imperial palace. Luo Qingtong had no one to rely on. As Ma Chenyi thought this, his heart suddenly couldn't help but sink. Luo Qingtong was in danger. "Luo Qingtong, what do you have to say?" After Su Deheng finished speaking, the Holy Emperor of the Empire of Qin, who was sitting on the main seat, raised his head and looked at the young girl standing on the other side of the main hall. That brilliant temperament made him faintly knit his brows when he saw it. It was no wonder that his year was so worried about such a peerless beauty. He heard that the other party's strength in the Holy Court of the Empire of Qin wasn't weak, and her talent was astonishing. However, all of this was nothing compared to the Celestial Palace. Paying too much attention to her was not a good thing. The Holy Emperor of the Empire of Qin didn't know that his bewitching medicine had been cured and Mo Chenxuan's plot had been exposed because of Luo Qingtong. He looked at Luo Qingtong with some displeasure and asked with a cold and indifferent face, "If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext." Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and said indifferently, "Since Su Deheng and the rest are so certain, then let them show the evidence. Otherwise, I believe that the sage emperor will uphold justice for me." How could she not see the displeasure in the eyes of the Holy Emperor of the Empire of Qin? But she didn't care. She did not want to rely on the people of the great Qin sacred dynasty to escape. Elder Xie's strength was too strong, and there was the celestial palace behind him. The people of the Empire of Qin would never want to go against him. Ma Chunyi and the Grand Dean were protecting her. Even if she revealed her identity as the evil Dr. Ghost Eye, no one would believe it. They would only think that they said it deliberately to protect her. So this time, Luo Qingtong could only rely on herself. Humph. Of course we have evidence. However, Luo Qingtong, if we show the evidence, you and your accomplice will be punished severely and be at our disposal. Shen Chuiyue said and glanced coldly at the Grand Dean beside Luo Qingtong. Obviously, the accomplice she was talking about was the Grand Dean. That's right. If it weren't for someone helping you, how could you, a little student, lure away the gold-seeking hamsters and take away so many treasures of Elder Xie? Grand Dean, although I know that you are very indulgent and protective of Luo Qingtong, your way of doing things is really disappointing. Chapter 1103. Su Deheng said with a pained expression. Luo Qingtong looked at him and Shen Chuiyue, then thought of Su Jinyue. She suddenly felt that this family was full of drama. You guys! The Grand Supreme Dean was even more furious. He was indeed against Su Deheng becoming the great teacher of the Soul Institute. He felt that Su Deheng's strength and ability weren't enough for this role. He didn't have any selfish motives. But he didn't expect that he would be viciously blackened today. No wonder they came to the Saint Emperor to complain. He was afraid that they had already made up their mind to not only deal with Luo Qingtong, but also deal with him, right? What a good plan to kill two birds with one stone. The Grand Supreme Dean was so angry that he stomped his feet. He wished he could rush over and kill Su Deheng and the rest, then pull Luo Qingtong away. But in front of the Saint Emperor, he didn't have the right to be presumptuous. Moreover, Su Deheng and the rest had Elder Xie, a transcendent sage, by their side. Just as the Grand Supreme Dean was panting in anger, Luo Qingtong's voice rang out. Okay. As long as you can find evidence, I will plead guilty to the Grand Supreme Dean and let you punish me. But if you can't produce evidence, you have to let us go. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes and looked at Su Deheng and the rest. Okay. Shen Chuiyue immediately agreed. She sneered at Luo Qingtong, her heart filled with pride and coldness. She was waiting for Luo Qingtong to say this. At that time, she would get rid of her and the Grand Supreme Dean. This woman probably didn't know, right? The gold-seeking hamster was their celestial palace's precious beast. Naturally, there was a way to raise and control it. Previously, they didn't know what kind of treasure Luo Qingtong had on her that made the gold-seeking hamster so excited that it broke free from Elder Xie's spiritual control. But now that both sides were within reach of each other, no matter how tightly Luo Qingtong hid herself, as long as Elder Xie released his spiritual power, the gold-seeking hamster would obediently listen to his orders. When he crawled out of Luo Qingtong's body, the scene would be wonderful. At that time, Luo Qingtong would not be able to defend herself. With that thought in mind, she looked at Elder Xie proudly and said, Elder, please make your move. Elder, please take action. Su Deheng, who was beside her, also said respectfully and excitedly. Without the Grand Principal, the Elders Association would be disbanded. When he returned to the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin, he could easily become the principal with the help of Shen Chuiyue. At that time, they would properly deal with the Crown Prince of the Empire of Qin. The two of them sneered. That Elder Xie slowly raised his head and looked at Luo Qingtong. With an unfathomable expression he said, You really don't want to plead guilty? He had the demeanor of an expert. As long as you hand over the gold-seeking hamster and those treasures, this elder won't look into your crime of theft. I'll even train you by my side. How about it? He looked at Luo Qingtong's devastatingly beautiful face and said covetously. The young girl's face was absolutely beautiful and her temperament was bewitching. She had an awe-inspiring domineering aura and a calm grace. She was truly a top grade. He couldn't bear to punish this kind of girl. As long as she was willing to hand over the treasures in her hands and the gold-seeking hamster, he promised to treat her well. As for the grudges between Su Deheng and Shen Chuiyue and Luo Qingtong, what did it have to do with him? As soon as Elder Xie's words left his mouth, Luo Qingtong smiled. Elder Xie wants to train me by your side? Chapter 1104. Unfortunately, I'd rather see Elder Xie being taken in and trained by someone. Why don't we raise the stakes? As Luo Qingtong spoke, the smile on her lips was cold and evil as she looked in Elder Xie's direction. In an instant, the latter was furious. Bitch. I gave you face, but you don't want it. Elder Xie's face was full of anger. The training he was talking about was naturally not an ordinary training. Luo Qingtong used his own words to reply to him, instantly making him think of that kind of unbearable scene, and his face darkened. Since you won't shed tears until you see the coffin, then I'll fulfill your wish. He originally thought that the other party was not bad looking. If she was willing to submit to him, the taste of pleasure under his body would definitely be very good. But he didn't think that the other party would be so unappreciative. Since that was the case, there was no need for him to have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. Once the other party was convicted, wouldn't she still fall into his hands? At that time, he would definitely let her know the consequences of what she had just said. As Elder Xie thought of this, he suddenly snorted coldly. He raised his hand and began to use the Celestial Palace's secret technique to control the gold-seeking hamsters. That was the beast-taming technique that the Celestial Palace had specially invited the most powerful array master in the hidden world to create for the gold-seeking hamsters in their sect. Under the activation of the beast-taming brand, as long as he poured his mental strength into it, he would be able to control the other party. This was also specially drawn to prevent the gold-seeking hamsters from being unwilling to return after finding an excellent treasure, or from wanting to escape. The control brand was divided into two types: the main array and the sub-array. When Elder Xie came out, he drew the sub-array in the palm of his hand. The method to control the main array was still in the sect, and was controlled by the sect leader. Therefore, when the gold-seeking hamsters broke free from his mental strength control, he didn't think too much about it. After all, the control of the sub-array was not as strong as the main array, so it wasn't impossible for it to break free. But that would definitely happen when the gold-seeking hamsters found a huge treasure. That kind of treasure would definitely be able to increase the strength of the Celestial Palace sect by more than 10 times. Therefore, Elder Xie could not wait to deal with Luo Qingtong. He did not even care about the dignity of a transcendent saint and an outer elder of Celestial Palace. All for the sake of obtaining the treasures on the girl's body. It was definitely a rare treasure that could allow his strength to soar and contribute greatly to the sect. Just thinking about it made Elder Xie's body tremble with excitement. Quick! He pointed out with his finger. Gold-seeking hamster. Come out! In order to prevent the gold-seeking hamster from being attracted by the aura of the treasure on Luo Qingtong's body, and once again resisting his summoning and control like before, Elder Xie exerted a lot of effort in pointing this finger. Almost all of the power in his body was poured into that point, and in an instant, it entered the subformation. However, it was quiet all around. No gold-seeking hamster jumped out of Luo Qingtong's body. Creak creak. In Luo Qingtong's sea of consciousness, the 9-layered exquisite pagoda, the little gold-seeking hamster was happily jumping around in the space of the first floor. It looked like it wasn't affected in the slightest. Creak creak. It raised its hand to fiddle with the huge cocoon of light that Snowball had transformed into. After the latter moved a bit, it hurriedly ran away with its 4 paws. It looked like it was having a lot of fun. Chapter 1105. How is this possible? He repeatedly raised his hand in disbelief. Quick! 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 Gold-seeking hamster, come out! He pointed his finger one after another, using all his strength, but there was still no movement on Luo Qingtong's body. Elder Xie was as tired as a dog, half leaning and half leaning on the armrest of the chair behind him, gasping for breath. Even with his strength, he had almost exhausted all of his mental strength by activating so many of the formations in succession. He was so angry that he almost cut off his own hand. How is this possible? His face was ferocious as he supported himself on the armrest behind him, glaring at Luo Qingtong and saying, "The beast-controlling array given by the sect is absolutely not a problem. Slut, did you do something to it?" Elder Xie didn't believe that he couldn't summon the gold-seeking hamster. That sect's treasure beast must be on Luo Qingtong's body. There was absolutely no doubt about it. But how could he not summon it? Compared to getting the treasure, Elder Xie was more worried that he would lose the gold-seeking hamster. Everyone knew the difference between a fish and a fisherman. As long as there was that gold-seeking hamster, they could get the best treasure. But without that gold-seeking hamster, then even the best treasure couldn't make up for this loss. Slut, what did you do? Elder Xie looked at Luo Qingtong with a murderous gaze. At this time, he couldn't care less about being attracted by her beauty. If there was a problem with that gold-seeking hamster, then even if he got the treasure on Luo Qingtong's body, he would still die when he returned to the sect. Elder Xie, you're joking. Luo Qingtong looked at him indifferently and raised her eyebrows. Didn't you say that you have evidence, so you want to prove that I took your treasure and that gold-seeking hamster? Now that you can't take out the evidence, you say that I did something. If I could do something in front of a transcendent saint like you, then now, it wouldn't be your turn to interrogate me. Luo Qingtong said coldly. Her words caused the people around her to nod slightly. They could clearly see that Luo Qingtong didn't do anything. On the other hand, that Elder Xie clearly said that he would show evidence. In the end, after putting on an act, he said that Luo Qingtong had done something. That was why he couldn't produce any evidence. Was this a King joke? The young girl was only a martial emperor, yet she was able to play tricks in front of him, a transcendent saint. How could it make him so tired that he was sweating profusely, gasping for breath when he spoke, and his tongue was hanging out like a dog? This was simply an insult to their intelligence. This was too much of an act. He was really treating them like fools. In fact, everyone present could more or less guess that Elder Xie and the others had deliberately come to find trouble with Luo Qingtong. But to do it so obviously, he really did not put them in his eyes. This was especially true for the sage emperor of the Empire of Qin. His face instantly turned as black as coal. He was afraid of the Celestial Palace, so he was willing to give Elder Xie and the others face. But this didn't mean that he was afraid of them. Elder Xie was just an outer sect elder of the Celestial Palace. It wasn't like the imperial family of the Empire of Qin didn't have any transcendent saints. Chapter 1106. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said to Elder Xie, "Thank you, Saint." He gritted his teeth and reminded him word by word, "She's just a student in the martial emperor realm." So, you said she did something to you. Are you trying to say that you, a saint, can't even compare to a student in the martial emperor realm? She's not even the strongest in the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin. Luo Qingtong is just a new student in the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin. It's really amazing to have such a cultivation. But you're King Saint. You said she did something to you in front of so many people. Can't you come up with a better excuse? The veins on the Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin's forehead were bulging. Elder Xie immediately snapped out of his daze after being reminded by Su Chen. But he was very sullen in his heart. The gold-seeking hamster is definitely in Luo Qingtong's possession. There's no doubt about it. He saw the gold-seeking hamster run into Luo Qingtong's courtyard with his own eyes. Damn it, he shouldn't have listened to Su Deheng's words and complained to the Saint Emperor because he was afraid that Luo Qingtong would run away. He wanted to borrow the Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin's hand to kill her. Now, he didn't want to borrow the Saint Emperor's hand to kill her. His old face was about to be completely lost. More importantly, it was the gold-seeking hamster. Luo Qingtong. Elder Xie took a deep breath and looked at the beautiful girl in front of him. I don't know what method you used to get the gold-seeking hamster out of my control. But that gold-seeking hamster is the precious beast of the Celestial Palace. You must hand it over. And the treasure on you, you must also hand it over. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving this door today. At this moment, Elder Xie had completely given up the idea of finding excuses. So what if he wanted to rob her? With his strength and the influence of the Celestial Palace, he did not believe that anyone could stop him. As Elder Xie spoke, he released his suppressive aura in an instant. Thank you, Elder. Don't go overboard. Ma Chenyi, Grand Supreme Dean, and the others were already overjoyed when Elder Xie's spell failed. Luo Qingtong was finally all right. However, they did not expect the other party to be so shameless. You can't slander Luo Qingtong, so now you want to rob her? These two sentences didn't even need to be pretentious. They were simply rude and unreasonable, revealing the nature of a bandit. The group of people were filled with righteous indignation. Ma Chenyi immediately stood in front of Luo Qingtong and said to the sage emperor of the Empire of Qin, Imperial Father, you also saw it. The people from the Celestial Palace are deliberately looking for trouble with Luo Qingtong. They are using you. Aren't you angry? Moreover, Luo Qingtong is the princess of Great Chu. Grand Tutor can testify. Imperial Father, you can also use the national seal to sense it. She has the power of Great Chu. Imperial Father, you can't let anything happen to her. As soon as Ma Chunyi said this, the sage emperor of the Empire of Qin's expression changed slightly. This Luo Qingtong is the princess of Great Chu? Of course. He knew that there was a princess of Great Chu. He even sent Grand Tutor Jiang to the inferior country where she came from to send gifts. However, he did not pay special attention to her name. So, this Luo Qingtong was the newly conferred princess of Great Chu? Ma Chunyi would not joke about this kind of thing. Moreover, the sage emperor of the Empire of Qin could also distinguish through the power of the country's fate. Chapter 1107. Thank you, Holy One. After confirming Luo Qingtong's identity, the Holy Emperor of the Empire of Qin's face turned cold. He said in a low voice, "You promised to let her go if you can't produce evidence. I was the witness and heard it with my own ears. I'm afraid I can't let you do anything to her." The Holy Princess of the Chu dynasty had a very high status. Moreover, the title of Holy Princess was personally conferred by the Chu dynasty's transcendent sage. Although the Holy Emperor of the Empire of Qin did not want to offend the Celestial Palace, he did not want to offend the Chu dynasty either. He was the witness of this matter. If he allowed Elder Xie to do anything to Luo Qingtong, he would not be able to answer to the Chu dynasty. Is that so? Elder Xie sneered. He looked at Ma Chunyi and the Grand Supreme Dean, who heaved a sigh of relief. Then he raised his hand and sucked. Swoosh. Standing behind Elder Xie, Su Deheng and Shen Chuyue, who were full of joy and pride because of his actions, were sucked into his hands. Pa! Elder Xie's hands suddenly clasped their necks tightly. Elder Xie. Su Deheng and Shen Chuyue did not expect Elder Xie to do anything to them. They looked at Elder Xie, who was holding them in his hands in horror as they struggled to break free. However, Elder Xie was a transcendent sage. How could they break free? If they had been prepared when Elder Xie attacked, they might have been able to escape. But now, no matter how hard they struggled, they could not escape from Elder Xie's hands. The latter continued to tighten his grip on their necks. That promise wasn't made by this elder. Since the Holy Emperor wants an explanation, then I'll kill them and give you an explanation. But I must do something to Luo Qingtong. Whoever dares to stop me will be going against the Celestial Palace. I hope you know what's best for you, Sacred Emperor. As Elder Xie spoke, he clenched his fists and broke the necks of Su Deheng and Shen Chuyue. The two of them didn't even make a sound before they died with their eyes wide open. Before he died, his eyes were filled with disbelief. They had never thought that the two of them would be the ones to die after setting up a trap to deal with Luo Qingtong. Bang! Elder Xie waved his hand heavily. With a loud bang, the bodies of Su Deheng and Shen Chuyue were smashed to the ground. Can I make a move on her now? Elder Xie said with a sinister smile on his face. Get out of my way. Anyone who stands in my way will die. His voice was cold and harsh. With a bang, the aura around him instantly turned into a whirlwind and rushed towards Luo Qingtong. From the whirlwind, a pitch-black hand suddenly reached out and grabbed Luo Qingtong. Come over here. Elder Xie's voice was cold but full of confidence. As a sage transcendence, he couldn't make any mistakes. The other party was only a martial emperor. Qingtong, run! At this moment, the Grand Dean stood in front of Luo Qingtong. Ma Chunyi had already been pulled away by the commander of the Imperial Guards. The Holy Emperor of the Empire of Qin would never allow his most outstanding son to risk his life. Elder Xie's movements were ruthless. With a loud bang, he struck the Grand Dean. Boom! Their attacks collided in an instant. Chapter 1108. Bang! In the main city of the Black Field of the Empire of Qin, a spirit ship crashed heavily into the anti-airspace barrier above the main city of the Black Field. Before the strong fighters guarding the Black Field on the city walls could shout, a series of urgent voices could be heard from the ship. Quickly bring us to see the city lord. Evil Dr. Gui Tong is in danger. A group of figures dashed out of the ship. It was Su Xiaoxiao and the others. At this moment, they looked anxious and rushed directly to the strong fighters guarding the Black Field on the city walls of the Black Field. What? Hearing their words, the strong fighters guarding the city walls of the Black Field were shocked. Then, someone immediately flew in front of Su Xiaoxiao and the others. Come with us. As they spoke, each of them took one person, and with a swoosh, the group of people disappeared from the city walls of the Black Region capital. The city lord's residence in the main city of the Black Field. Bei Qing was listening to the reports of his subordinates. His mind was about to be tied up after hearing the things that the other party said. He kept dozing off. He really didn't know what his master was thinking. He brought Feng Yu out to test his strength and left him alone in the main city to deal with things. Shouldn't he be the one to look for a fight? Why did he look for Feng Yu, who looked calm and elegant but was actually sinister and full of evil tricks? This kind of messy matter was suitable for him to deal with. Bei Qing felt a headache coming on. After the city lord of the Black Field reported another power dispute in the main city of the Black Field, he slammed the table and shouted angrily, "Tell them! If there are any disputes in the future, no matter what the reason is, we'll beat them up first. After they calm down, we'll let them deal with it themselves. Hurry up and do it." Bei Qing waved his hand impatiently. What the F***CK is going on? To Bei Qing, there was nothing that couldn't be solved with a fight. If that didn't work, then they would fight. Let's see who dares to bother him with such trivial matters. The Blackfield City Lord's face twitched when he heard the Right Protector's words. He was just about to say something when suddenly, a clamor sounded from outside. The group of Blackfield guards appeared in front of him and Bei Qing with Su Xiaoxiao and the others. City Lord, Right Protector. They claimed to be Lord Ghost Eye's followers, saying that Lord Ghost Eye is in danger in the Empire of Qin, and they are asking for our help. Before the group of Blackfield guards could finish their words, Bei Qing had already recognized Su Xiaoxiao and the others. In a flash, she appeared in front of them and grabbed Yuan Hu, who was at the front, and asked, "What's going on? What are you talking about?" Bei Qing had been with Yi Qianxian for a long time, so he naturally knew where Su Xiaoxiao and the others were with Luo Qingtong. Seeing them appear in the Blackfield sub-city, Bei Qing's heart sank. People from Celestial Palace came to the Empire of Qin to make trouble for our boss, saying that she stole their treasure. Our boss has been taken to the Empire of Qin's Imperial Palace. Hurry up and save her. That Elder Xie from the Celestial Palace is a transcendent saint. Our boss can't defeat him. Su Xiaoxiao, Yuan Hu, and the others quickly told Bei Qing what had happened, and they were so anxious that their eyes turned red. Bastard! Bei Qing's face fell when he heard this. Summon all the experts of the Saint Realm in the Black Field and follow me to the holy capital of the Empire of Qin. Master is now testing his strength with Feng Yu in that place, and I don't know if he can sense the danger of the evil doctor. Chapter 1109. Bang! In the conference hall of the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin, the power of the Grand Supreme Dean and Elder Xie clashed fiercely in mid-air. Rumble! A series of explosions rang out. From the place where the two attacks collided, countless cracks spread out in an instant. Waves of energy spread out from the center of their attacks and spread out in all directions with terrifying power. The conference hall was the place where the Emperor of the Empire of Qin usually dealt with urgent matters. Usually, when things got urgent, it was possible for the ministers to quarrel and fight with each other. Under such circumstances, the materials used to build it were all top-notch. The power of an ordinary saint would not be able to shake it at all. However, at this moment, this magnificent hall was shaking violently under the attacks of the Grand Supreme Dean and Elder Xie. Cracks spread out on the pillars of the hall, forming a spider-web-like pattern. The entire main hall was emitting teeth-numbing creaking sounds under that powerful attack. A battle between experts who had surpassed the Saint Realm was so terrifying. Ah! Under the barrage of attacks, many of the internal guards were sent flying out of the hall. Screams of agony rang out. "Your Majesty, leave quickly!" The internal guards of the Imperial House hurriedly escorted the Emperor of the Empire of Qin away. Ma Chenyi wanted to stay, but the Emperor of the Empire of Qin ordered Grand Tutor Jiang to drag him out by force. In an instant, the hall was empty. Only Luo Qingtong, the Grand Supreme Dean, and Elder Xie were left. Humph! How dare you compete with the light of the sun and the moon? Elder Xie sneered. He did not take the Grand Supreme Dean seriously at all. He was merely someone who had surpassed the saint realm. In the eyes of ordinary people, he was a rare expert. However, in front of him he was nothing. If he was not a saint, so what if his strength was above the saint realm? It was just a matter of a few more moves. Thinking of this, he immediately increased the intensity of his attacks. Boom! The Grand Supreme Dean was barely able to take one of his moves. He was injured internally and could not use his full strength. Moreover, Elder Xie's strength was above his. As the strength of the opponent's attack increased, the Grand Supreme Dean immediately felt his own strength being suppressed. An extremely violent force was constantly suppressing him from Elder Xie's side. Knowing that he couldn't hold on for much longer, the Grand Principal gritted his teeth and raised his hand to push Luo Qingtong out. Little child of the evil doctor, leave now. The Grand Principal absolutely could not let anything happen to Luo Qingtong here. Otherwise, not to mention Yi Qianxian's anger, he would not be able to bear it. Even his conscience would feel uneasy for the rest of his life. He had promised that he would take good care of this little girl. Bang! Just as the Grand Principal raised his hand to push Luo Qingtong, his attack power was also dispersed by Elder Xie's attack. The latter's power was like a torrential river, sweeping over like raging waves. You want to leave? Dream on. All of you stay here. Elder Xie's face was ferocious. His stay naturally referred to the Grand Dean's life and Luo Qingtong's people. Rumble! In midair, Elder Xie's power swept over like a violent storm. The spiritual energy giant hand, which was as tall as several people, fiercely grabbed at Luo Qingtong and the Grand Supreme Dean. Go! The Grand Supreme Dean's hand was about to slap Luo Qingtong's body and send her out. Chapter 11:10. The young girl held his hand. Grand Principal. Luo Qingtong didn't even look at the raging waves of energy behind the Grand Principal that were as tall as several people. The large hand made of spiritual energy that had been standing on top of the mountain for a long time didn't attract the slightest bit of her attention. Do you still remember what I said to you when we first met? The young girl looked at him, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Evil, domineering, enchanting, confident. Evil Dr. Doll. The Grand Principal's hand was grabbed by Luo Qingtong. He felt the raging waves of energy coming from behind him, and his heart instantly burned with anxiety. Oh my God! What kind of situation is this? You doll, don't reminisce about old times. If you continue reminiscing about old times, the two of us will die. How could the Grand Principal not remember what Luo Qingtong said to him when they first met? It was this evil Dr. Doll who exposed his internal injuries. That was why he was itching to kidnap Luo Qingtong to the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin. In the end, this little girl had given the heaven-grade student admission notice that he had given to the Sky Hall of the main courtyard directly to Chu Lingfeng, that blockhead. He had made himself happy for nothing. Later on, in order to persuade her to come to the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin, he had even sent out a bunch of purple-grade heaven-grade student admission notices. God knows how many times the Elders Guild had used this against him because of this matter. But now wasn't the time to talk about this. Little doll, hurry up and leave. Feeling that the energy behind him was getting closer and closer, the Grand Principal couldn't care less anymore. Unable to break free from Luo Qingtong's hand, he could only directly push her away like this. However, before he could do anything, Luo Qingtong's voice rang out again. At that time, I said that I couldn't treat your injuries. But now we can try. As Luo Qingtong spoke, the blood-red light in her eyes suddenly flickered. Ocular technique. Activate. With Luo Qingtong's current strength, it was impossible for her to completely heal the Grand Principal's injuries and eliminate the raging waves of energy in his body. But she could temporarily open up a path in the midst of those waves of energy, allowing the Grand Principal's energy to pass through. Under such circumstances, she could completely allow the Grand Principal to temporarily recover his strength and not be limited to the suppression of that one injury. Boom! Luo Qingtong's energy flowed through the wrist of the Grand Principal and blasted into his body. Follow me. Luo Qingtong's voice rang. Evil Dr. Baby. However, something that astonished him happened. Boom boom boom. Luo Qingtong's energy swept through the area where the raging waves of energy were swirling without any obstruction. Her energy accurately passed through the gaps in those waves of energy and passed through the area where the waves of energy were swirling without alarming those waves of energy. The Grand Principal, who was controlling the energy in his body, was stunned. Chapter 11:11. His power and aura followed Luo Qingtong's power and aura, crossing the place where the violent power was. Boom, boom, boom. The channel that had not been opened for many years was opened. In an instant, the aura around the Grand Supreme Dean skyrocketed. Ha ha! Feeling that he had recovered his peak strength, the Grand Supreme Dean was so happy that he couldn't control himself. It had been too long. How long had it been since he had felt so full of power? It was really refreshing. The Grand Supreme Dean's aura skyrocketed. Before he could say anything to Luo Qingtong, rumble! Behind him, Elder Xie's attack arrived. Bang! The Grand Supreme Dean waved his hand fiercely. Boom! The power of countless meridians in his body surged out in an instant and clashed fiercely with the power that Elder Xie had unleashed. Rumble! In an instant, Elder Xie's attack, which he thought was foolproof, was blocked by the Grand Supreme Dean. What's more, it was bombarded by the aftermath of the Grand Supreme Dean's attack. It formed a fan-shaped attack wave and retreated back to Elder Xie. Elder Xie was shocked and did not have time to defend. With a bang, he was blasted back several steps by the force and almost sat on the ground awkwardly. Bastard! Elder Xie was infuriated. He had been careless just now. He thought that there was no problem in the end, so he removed the power defense around his body. Otherwise, the Grand Supreme Dean's attack would not have hurt him. Go go go! Little Luo, let's go! After the Grand Supreme Dean blasted him back, he pulled Luo Qingtong and was about to run. This was the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin, which was not conducive to the battle between him and Elder Xie. Everything would be fine when they returned to the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin. The people of the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin did not protect Luo Qingtong, but he would. Go! Let's go back to the Saint Academy of the Empire of Qin. Once they returned to the Sacred Institute of the Empire of Qin and activated the array formation, everything would be fine. The Empire of Qin's Saint Academy's protective array could only be broken by a Saint Realm Master. Elder Xie, this shameless person, definitely had no choice. However, if he could think of it, so could Elder Xie. Stop them. Su Deheng and Shen Chuyue's idea was not without benefits. Sure enough, the Grand Dean did his best to protect Luo Qingtong. Fortunately, this wasn't the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to her. But now, Elder Xie sneered. Following his words, several figures instantly appeared at the entrance of the hall. He was the outer disciple of Celestial Palace who came to the Empire of Qin with Elder Xie. The Grand Principal had forgotten about their existence. Elder Xie's path was blocked. Elder Xie stomped his foot hard on the ground and stopped himself from retreating. In the next second, he appeared beside Luo Qingtong. Bitch, come here. Elder Xie waved his palm at the Grand Principal, while his other hand formed a bow and reached out to grab Luo Qingtong. With the help of the outer disciple of Celestial Palace, the Grand Principal had no time to deal with Luo Qingtong. Little girl. Elder Xie's claw was about to grab Luo Qingtong, and the Grand Principal's pupils shrank. Just as Elder Xie's claw was about to touch Luo Qingtong, buzz! Luo Qingtong's body suddenly lit up with rays of light. Chapter 11:12. Rumble. The entire Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin trembled. What? What's going on? The Sacred Emperor of the Empire of Qin, who was escorted out of the Imperial Palace by the Imperial Palace's internal guards, looked at the scene above the Imperial Palace in shock. Wisps of ferocious dragon-shaped auras were surging and gathering in his direction. In the holy capital of the Empire of Qin, the sound of a dragon's roar resonated from the ancestral Imperial Ancestral Temple, which was located far away from the Imperial Palace. A huge invisible dragon suddenly appeared on top of the ancestral Imperial Temple and roared at the sky. Countless streams of the imperial providence of the Empire of Qin and the powerful energy stored in the ancestral Imperial Temple surged out and appeared above the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin. Buzz! Streams of dragon-shaped aura flew up one after another. The entire imperial palace of the Empire of Qin was like a giant beast that had been awakened by someone. Powerful energy surged out and filled every corner of the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin. The sacred emperor of the Empire of Qin and the others watched this scene with their mouths agape. The Empire Protecting Array. The Empire Protecting Array, which had been built by the founding saint to protect the imperial family of the Empire of Qin and protect the imperial family of the Empire of Qin, had been activated at this time. In order to activate such a formation, the Saint Emperor had to personally use his bloodline and the power of the nation's destiny to activate it. This was one of the last barriers in the war between the Empire of Qin. It was so powerful that the guarding array of the Sacred Academy couldn't compare to it. At the very least, it would take an army of thousands of men and countless Saint Realm experts to break through. To break through this array with one's own strength, one would need to be at least at the nascent Venerable Realm. What everyone was surprised about was how this array formation could be activated under such circumstances. After all, the Sacred Emperor was still here. He didn't go to the heavenly altar and perform the heavenly ritual. He didn't use his own bloodline and imperial providence to communicate with the ancestral imperial temple to activate this array. The Sacred Emperor of the Empire of Qin was also shocked, speechless. He couldn't explain what was happening in front of him. How could an array left behind by their ancestors be activated for no reason? Moreover, judging from the direction of the aura, it was coming from the conference hall. After all, Elder Xie, the Grand Dean, and Luo Qingtong were still inside. What was going on? While the crowd outside was shocked, Elder Xie was also shocked beyond words in the great conference hall. How is this possible? Elder Xie himself couldn't even count how many times he had called out. It was impossible. He was in shock on the imperial providence. In front, Luo Qingtong was dressed in red. She was enchanting and charming. The young girl's body was enveloped in a bright silver light barrier. Countless dragon-shaped auras were entrenched around her, completely nullifying the power of his claw attack. Luo Qingtong's long hair fluttered in the wind, and the lock of hair on her forehead danced in the wind. The black shadow floated in her blood-red eyes. It made the girl look like a goddess of the 9 heavens. She looked like a devilish ghost. Her devilish charm and alluring aura was so mesmerizing that people couldn't take their eyes off her. There was a type of person who could amaze time just by standing there. Chapter 11-13. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and stroked Little Pig in her arms. Little Pig had already turned a blind eye to her perverted behavior and was numb to it. To think that it had been so anxious just now, thinking that this woman was doomed this time. Damn it! A Saint Transcendence had made his move. Little Pig had used up most of his accumulated strength when he was dealing with that Silver Sword Elder. He couldn't transform into his true form. Who would have thought that this woman already had a plan in mind? When she was arguing with Elder Xie, she had already activated her eye technique to secretly observe and crack the nation-protecting array above the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin. Now that she was protected by this array, Elder Xie wouldn't be able to hurt her. Elder Xie should be glad that she was only a martial emperor. Even if she used all her strength, she could only activate a little bit of the nation-protecting array's power to protect herself. Moreover, she could only activate its defensive function. Otherwise, if Luo Qingtong was a little stronger, she could control the entire nation-protecting array in a matter of minutes. When she activated it, he didn't want to die too miserably. The Grand Supreme Dean also looked at Luo Qingtong with a dumbfounded expression. Little doll, it. He raised his finger and pointed at Luo Qingtong and the bright silver array covering her body. He was speechless for a long time. A protective shield that could block the attack of a Saint Transcendence. Damn it, how strong was its defensive power? Even if Luo Qingtong had such a treasure, she shouldn't have enough strength to activate it, right? Moreover, why did the dragon-shaped power swimming around Luo Qingtong look so familiar? While the Grand Supreme Dean was still in a daze, Elder Xie had already recovered from the shock and continued to attack in disbelief. Impossible! You can't block my attack! He shouted harshly. With a pong sound, the sleeves of his robe shook. An extremely violent power surged out. Under the control of his aura, all the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the great assembly hall was sucked dry, forming the shape of a huge mountain above his head. 5 great mountain suppression. One after another, huge mountains of spiritual energy appeared, and then heavily pressed down on Luo Qingtong. The latter narrowed his eyes and looked at him with a pleased expression. As long as Luo Qingtong was in the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin, under the protection of the Empire Protection Array, she would never be harmed. Elder Xie and the others thought that once they lured her away from the Holy Academy of the Empire of Qin, she would have no one to rely on. What she didn't know was that wherever her pair of blood-red eyes passed, there would be something to rely on. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as the 5 mountains came crashing down, the entire conference hall began to tremble, and a series of deep gullies appeared on the ground. Luo Qingtong was still unscathed. The dragon-shaped aura around her surged, weakening the violent aura layer by layer until it finally disappeared into nothingness. Elder Xie's face turned ugly as he continued to attack. Universe Blazing Sun Palm. Star Seal. Heaven Tyrant Fist. He launched one attack after another, but he couldn't even touch a hair on Luo Qingtong's body. The veins on Elder Xie's forehead were exposed, and his face was as ferocious as a ghost. Seeing this scene, the Grand Supreme Dean at the side immediately laughed out loud. Chapter 11:14. The Grand Supreme Dean had already recognized the dragon-shaped aura surrounding Luo Qingtong. It was the power of the Nation Protection Array. Luo Qingtong was actually protected by the Nation Protection Array. No wonder Elder Xie couldn't do anything to her. Although he didn't know how Luo Qingtong did it, the Grand Supreme Dean felt very happy when he saw this scene in front of him. It was like drinking a bucket of ice water on a hot day. The veins on Elder Xie's forehead bulged one by one, and he looked like he was about to explode. His malicious gaze wandered around Luo Qingtong's body. He wanted to find out where her defensive barrier came from. How could it resist so many of his attacks? Even if it was Luo Qingtong's treasure, she didn't have enough power to activate it. Not to mention that he had attacked her so many times. If it was her treasure, she wouldn't have been able to withstand it by herself. Suddenly, Elder Xie's gaze suddenly froze. His cold snake-like gaze stopped on the dragon-shaped aura swimming around Luo Qingtong's body. He didn't pay much attention to it just now, but this dragon-shaped aura. In an instant, Elder Xie seemed to have thought of something, and the veins on his forehead bulged fiercely. Bang! He waved his sleeve heavily, and a violent force fiercely bombarded the ground. Good, good, good. He laughed sinisterly and said, "Good 3 times in a row." The veins on his forehead bulged more and more. "It's good to have a good face. Bitch, I underestimated you." Elder Xie had already recognized that this dragon-shaped aura was clearly the power of providence of the imperial family of the Empire of Qin. The imperial family of the Empire of Qin was protecting Luo Qingtong. Bastard! The anger in his heart was bursting. He had clearly warned the imperial family of the Empire of Qin not to interfere in this matter. He didn't expect that they would still make a move. They actually used the Nation Protection Array of the Empire of Qin to protect Luo Qingtong. No wonder he couldn't beat them. Elder Xie, who thought he had found the crux of the problem and the reason, instantly flew up. "I'll go tell the imperial family of the Empire of Qin to remove this array, or I'll kill the crown prince. Let's see what else you can be arrogant about," Elder Xie said coldly, and with a swish, he disappeared from the hall. Not good. The Grand Supreme Dean, who was laughing loudly, suddenly stopped and rushed out. Bastard, he really didn't want to lose face as a transcendent saint. In order to deal with Luo Qingtong, he even wanted to go against the imperial family of the Empire of Qin, and even attacked the crown prince. He was simply crazy. In fact, Elder Xie was almost crazy. He would never let Luo Qingtong go. It would be fine if it was only for the treasures in the other party's possession. At worst, he could just leave first and wait for a suitable opportunity to make a move against the other party. But now, that gold-seeking hamster was in Luo Qingtong's body. This time, he brought the gold-seeking hamster out for great use. And it would be used soon. Under such circumstances, who knew how long Luo Qingtong would stay in the imperial family of the Empire of Qin? Even if she left the imperial family of the Empire of Qin, there was still the Celestial Institute of the Empire of Qin. He couldn't wait that long. Today, he would capture Luo Qingtong in his hands. Even if he might provoke the saint transcendence of the imperial family of the Empire of Qin, it didn't matter. Anyway, he had the Celestial Palace behind him. What could they do to him? Elder Xie sneered. Swish! His figure suddenly appeared outside the conference hall. Chapter 11:15. Humph! Elder Xie snorted coldly. Then he waved his sleeve. In an instant, the few Imperial House internal guards who were holding Mo Chenai back were sent flying with blood gushing out of their mouths. Elder Xie raised his hand and waved. In an instant, Mo Chenai's body flew towards him uncontrollably. Your Highness! Seeing this, Grand Tutor Jiang, who was standing beside Ma Chenyi, immediately attacked. However, as soon as he attacked, he was slapped back by Elder Xie. Grand Tutor Jiang was not as strong as the Grand Dean. Yi-er! Seeing this, the Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin was shocked and then angry. Elder Xie, what is the meaning of this? It was fine that the other party attacked Luo Qingtong, but the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin did not intervene. Why did he suddenly attack Yi-er? Humph! Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin. The Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin deliberately went against the Celestial Palace, but it doesn't matter. I'll capture your son now. You must immediately deactivate the defensive matrix in the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin. Otherwise, I'll kill him. Elder Xie's voice rang out. In an instant, the Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin felt even more wrong than Do-yi. What did he mean by the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin deliberately went against the Celestial Palace? If he really wanted to go against the Celestial Palace, he would have asked the Elder Ancestor for help. What's more, he wasn't the one who activated the nation-protecting magical array. How could he possibly deactivate it? The Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin felt his vision go dark, and he was about to vomit blood. Seeing that Ma Chenyi was about to fall into Elder Xie's hands, he quickly shouted, Elder Xie, don't do anything stupid. The Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin really did not intervene in this matter. How did the nation-protecting formation activate? I really don't know. But how could Elder Xie believe him? Humph. The Empire of Qin can only be activated by the power of the royal bloodline of the Qin Empire and the Qi Meridian of the nation. How do you not know how to activate it? The Sage Emperor of the Empire of Qin. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old kid? Since you don't care about your only son, then I'll kill him. Let's see if Luo Qingtong can still be a coward. Elder Xie said coldly. He remembered clearly that the Crown Prince had been protecting Luo Qingtong ever since he came in to complain to the Saint Emperor in the main hall. He even used all sorts of methods to find support for the other party. He didn't believe that Luo Qingtong would still hide in her turtle shell when he was about to die. As he thought about this, his 5 claws formed into a bow and shot towards Ma Chenyi's throat. Spirit energy surged from the palm. Once Ma Chenyi hit the palm of his hand, his collarbone would be torn apart and he would die on the spot. Just like Su Deheng and Shen Qiuyue, he would die miserably. Bastard! Seeing that Elder Xie was about to kill, the Sage Emperor of the Empire of Qin was anxious and angry. He suddenly used the secret method passed down by the royal family to communicate with the Sage Transcendence who was in seclusion, hoping that the Sage Transcendence could come out and stop the other party. But the Sage Transcendence was in seclusion. It would take a few seconds for him to wake up. It was too late. Luo Qingtong was going to kill his best son. How did she trigger the great Qin imperial family's nation-protecting formation? The Sage Emperor of the Empire of Qin was really angry. At this moment, Luo Qingtong suddenly stepped out of the hall. Bang! She transferred the bright silver shield from her body to Ma Chenyi. Then she suddenly jumped up and rushed out of the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin. Chapter 11:16. Bang! Elder Xie's claw landed on Ma Chenyi's throat, but the dragon-shaped aura around him dissipated it. However, Elder Xie wasn't angry. Seeing Luo Qingtong's figure dashing out, he laughed loudly. His figure suddenly dashed out and chased after her. Bitch, you really came out of that tortoise shell. Elder Xie's eyes flashed with a cold light. He knew that he could force this woman out by attacking the Crown Prince. Without the protection of the nation-protecting array formation, let's see how that woman can escape from my grasp. As he thought about it, he quickly chased after Luo Qingtong. Ahem! After Elder Xie left, Mo Chenye's body fell heavily on the ground. He coughed violently. At this moment, a loud explosion sounded from the depths of the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin. In the next second, a figure rushed out, giving off a terrifying aura as he appeared before Great Qin's holy emperor and the others. What's going on? The imperial palace of the Empire of Qin frowned and looked at the mess around them. There were traces of the nation-protecting array being activated. What's going on? Did someone attack the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin? Great-grandfather. Ma Chunyi hurriedly covered his throat and knelt in front of the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin. He begged, "Great-grandfather, please save Qing Tong." Ma Chunyi's words rang out, and before that transcendent saint could say anything, the great Qin sage emperor had already begun to berate him. "Shut up. Don't you think she's done enough harm to you? If she hadn't provoked the people from the Celestial Palace, the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin wouldn't have ended up like this. You almost died in the hands of that elder Xie. How dare you ask the ancestor to save her? Do you know what it means for the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin to go against the Celestial Palace?" The Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin looked at Ma Chunyi with disappointment. "Father." Ma Chunyi stood up, covering his neck. "Luo Qingtong has helped us a lot. I didn't tell you before because I was afraid that you wouldn't be worried. It was Luo Qingtong who found out about Emochen Xian and the Celestial Doctor. She also gave me the antidote to the bewitching drug you took." "Father, if it weren't for Luo Qingtong, the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin would have fallen into Emochen Xian and the Celestial Doctor's greedy wolf. It's reasonable for us to help her." Ma Chunyi had been wanting to talk to the Emperor of the Empire of Qin about this, but he hadn't found a chance. Now he told him everything. Hearing this, the Emperor of the Empire of Qin suddenly frowned. Those things were done by Luo Qingtong? But even if she did, it wasn't worth it for them to go against the Celestial Palace. Elder Xie obviously wouldn't give up Luo Qingtong. In such a case, if they saved Luo Qingtong, it was equivalent to going against the Celestial Palace behind Elder Xie. Luo Qingtong wasn't worth the risk. Well, don't talk about it. Even so, I've already defended her before. It was Elder Xie who refused to give up. The Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin can't do anything. Chapter 11:17. The Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin said coldly, "Father." Ma Chunyi's heart sank when he heard the Saint Emperor's refusal. Before he could say anything else, the Saint Master of the Empire of Qin waved his hand and said, "The Saint Emperor is right. The imperial family of the Empire of Qin shouldn't interfere in this matter. Let's leave it at that." Since the other party had left the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin, it had nothing to do with them anymore. The Saint Master of the Empire of Qin naturally wouldn't chase after Luo Qingtong to save her. It would be unwise to go against Elder Xie and the Celestial Palace. The Transcendent Saint, who had already guessed the gist of the situation from the conversation between Mo Chenai and the great Qin sage emperor, made a decision. Great-grandfather. Ma Chunyi's heart sank when he heard the Saint Master of Qin's words. If even his great-grandfather refused to help, wouldn't Luo Qingtong be doomed? How could she deal with Elder Xie? Without the empire-protecting array of the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin, how could she escape from the Saint Master of Qin with her martial emperor strength? Ma Chunyi's heart was filled with grief as he thought about it. He sat down on the ground, not knowing what to do to save Luo Qingtong. At this moment, the Grand Principal who had lost sight of Luo Qingtong returned. He was furious when he saw the scene and said coldly, "Saint Emperor Saint, you think this is the best for the Empire of Qin, but you don't know that standing aside like this is a disaster for the Empire of Qin. Ma Chunyi has created a good situation for you, but you've ruined it all. Just stay here and do nothing. If anything happens to Luo Qingtong, let me tell you, the imperial family of the Empire of Qin will be destroyed in an instant." Celestial Palace? The Celestial Palace is nothing compared to that fiend. The Grand Supreme Dean was truly furious. If it was any other time, he definitely wouldn't point at the sage emperor of the Empire of Qin and curse in front of the transcendent saints. But today, he really couldn't hold back anymore. If the sacred emperor of the Empire of Qin had not insisted on seeking justice for the people of the Celestial Palace and brought Luo Qingtong to the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin, nothing would have happened to Luo Qingtong in the Sacred Academy of the Empire of Qin. They wanted to curry favor with Elder Xie and the Celestial Palace behind him, But they did not know that compared to Yi Qianxian, Elder Xie and the Celestial Palace were nothing. Let's see how the imperial family of the Empire of Qin will explain themselves when that demon comes. If Luo Qingtong was lucky enough to be fine, then everything would be fine. But if something happened to her, perhaps the entire imperial family of the Empire of Qin would be buried with her. That would be digging their own graves. The Grand Supreme Dean didn't even bother to pay attention to them. He directly pulled Ma Chunyi and was about to leave. At this moment, boom! A huge roar sounded. In an instant, the entire holy capital of the Empire of Qin was filled with sharp alarms. It seemed that some defensive barriers had been triggered. In an instant, the sharp alarms resounded through the entire holy capital of the Empire of Qin. What's going on? Everyone in the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin raised their heads and looked up at the sky. The sacred emperor of the Empire of Qin was originally annoyed by the Grand Supreme Dean's attitude and tone. He was about to scold him. But when he heard the alarms, he immediately raised his head and looked up. With one look, he instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. Countless spiritual boats and spaceships appeared outside the holy capital of the Empire of Qin. The pitch-black hull of the ship, which was decorated with dark domain totems, burned his eyes. Chapter 11:18. Swish. Swish. One by one, figures flew out from the spirit ships. Hiss. At the sight of these figures, the people in the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin gasped even louder. Saint Realm. All of them were Saint Realm experts. Everyone in the holy capital of the Empire of Qin was shocked when they saw the figures who were all wearing black field uniforms and emitting powerful and terrifying auras. What was going on? Is Black Field going to attack the Empire of Qin? So many Saint Realm experts had been dispatched. While everyone was still in shock, Bei Qing had already appeared in the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin with the city governor of the Black Field and several other experts who had surpassed the Sage Realm. Where's Luo Qingtong? Bei Qing's face was filled with anxiety. He scanned the palace with his spiritual will and sensed the traces of the battle between transcendent saints. He did not sense Luo Qingtong's aura and his heart sank. Could something have happened to the evil doctor? At the thought of this, Bei Qing couldn't help but release the aura around her. In an instant, the people from the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin were so suppressed that their faces turned pale. If it weren't for the transcendent saint from the Empire of Qin's imperial family protecting them in time, they would have been forced to kneel in a sorry state. If a protector of the Black Field was already this strong, then how strong would Ming Zun himself be in the Black Field? The group looked at Bei Qing and the city lord of the Black Field main city and the others and could not help but feel shocked. They all knew that Black Field was very strong, but they didn't expect them to be this strong. In fact, the city lord hadn't even made a move yet. The Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin was also shocked. He didn't know that the Black Field's people would come in such an aggressive manner and ask about Luo Qingtong as soon as they arrived. Judging from the other party's anxiousness, they weren't here to cause trouble. Were they here to help Luo Qingtong? If that was the case, the sacred emperor of the Empire of Qin instantly paled. Beside him, Ma Chunyi didn't think too much about it. After Bei Qing finished speaking, he suddenly stepped forward and even rushed in front of the Grand Dean. He said to Bei Qing and the others anxiously, "Quick! Hurry up and save Qingtong. She lured Elder Xie away. The other party was a transcendent saint. She definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Go and find her." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed in the direction that Luo Qingtong and Elder Xie had left. All right. Bei Qing and the others didn't have the time to deal with the Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin. Once they found the evil doctor and he was safe and sound, they would slowly settle the score with him. The Saint Emperor of the Empire of Qin and the others had better pray that the evil doctor was safe and sound, otherwise, their master's anger couldn't be quenched even if the whole world raged. In the 100,000 mountain range in the holy capital of the Empire of Qin, Luo Qingtong's figure flitted through the mountain range at lightning speed. As soon as she left the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin, she immediately headed towards the 100,000 mountain range. Elder Xie had already threatened the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin once. There was no guarantee that he wouldn't do it again. If Luo Qingtong continued to stay in the holy capital of the Empire of Qin, even if she could avoid being detected by Elder Xie's aura, Her whereabouts would still be exposed when the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin activated the holy capital's magic array. Luo Qingtong wouldn't put her safety in the hands of others. Moreover, the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin wouldn't protect her at all. Therefore, the 100,000 mountain range was the safest place for her. She had the eye technique, so she wasn't afraid of encountering sudden dangers in this dangerous mountain range. Chapter 11-19. Boom, boom, boom. Elder Xie was hot on Luo Qingtong's tail. He waved his hand, one attack after another. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was boiling. Under the control of his strength, it formed a wall of spiritual energy in an instant and enveloped Luo Qingtong. If Luo Qingtong had not advanced to the martial emperor realm, this cage formed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth might have caused her trouble. After all, she had almost been caught by Yi Chenxian several times in the past. But now, buzz! Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed with a bloody light. She activated her pupil technique in her eyes. In an instant, she could clearly see the surging and condensing of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around her. The aura around her shook. The aura of the martial emperor realm gushed out and condensed around her. She seized the opportunity to poke at the core of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. In an instant, the speed at which the spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensed suddenly slowed down. Taking advantage of this pause, Luo Qingtong rushed out of the cage formed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in an instant. Bang! Behind her, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth did not catch the target and shattered into pieces. Bastard! Elder Xie stomped his feet in anger. This woman was more slippery than a loach. Elder Xie had thought that after he had forced Luo Qingtong out of the imperial palace of the Empire of Qin, the girl would be at his mercy. After all, was there any suspense between a saint transcendence and a martial emperor realm? However, this woman just had to find a way to escape from his hands again and again. Obviously, with her strength, it was impossible for her to shake his technique. Elder Xie did not know what the problem was. But it did not matter. Elder Xie sneered as he watched the spiritual energy of Luo Qingtong explode every time the spiritual energy of heaven and earth exploded. With the spiritual energy, he was not afraid that this woman could escape from his hands. He wanted to see how many times she could escape from his hands with her martial emperor realm strength and how many times she could resist his technique. He was waiting for her to be exhausted. In Luo Qingtong's arms, Little Pig looked at her with a worried face and said, "Woman, this is really troublesome. We can't get rid of this old chrysanthemum. His spiritual energy of heaven and earth is on your body. It's fine if he's a martial emperor realm saint, he can't hide. However, he's a saint transcendence and earth spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This time, you can't escape." This time, Little Pig was really anxious. The previous few times when Luo Qingtong was in danger, even if the girl could not escape in the end, it had something to rely on. But this time, it had only revealed its true form once, and killed that Silver Sword sect elder. It's over. It's over. Is this woman really going to die here this time? Is she going to be caught by this old man with a face full of wrinkles? Thinking of how Elder Xie was drooling over Luo Qingtong, who knew what he would do to her if he caught her. At that time. Why are you panicking? Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. In her previous life, she had been hunted down countless times. Before she became strong, she had always escaped from death. She knew very well that she had to remain calm in this kind of situation. But this time it was indeed troublesome. Luo Qingtong sensed the spiritual energy of the surroundings. Chapter 11-20. Under the control of Elder Xie's spiritual energy, she simply couldn't absorb any energy to replenish her body's aura. If this continued, the aura in her body would inevitably be exhausted. At that time, even if she had the eye technique without enough strength, she still wouldn't be able to dodge Elder Xie's attack. What should she do? What should she do? Luo Qingtong's mind was spinning rapidly. At the same time, in a desolate land far away from the true Spill continent, a silver silhouette and a blue silhouette were crossing each other at lightning speed. Waves of terrifyingly powerful energy rippled out from the center of the collision between the two attacks. In this desolate land, countless mountains and boulders were flattened. All of a sudden, the silver figure came to a stop. "Hi, Lord." That blue figure also hurriedly retracted his attack to prevent his attack from accidentally injuring Yi Qianren, who had suddenly retracted his attack. The latter didn't speak. He only raised his hand and rubbed the 10-directional dragon ring on his left ring finger. Was it an illusion? His heart suddenly palpitated. Yi Qianxian's finger gently rubbed the 10-directional dragon ring. Then he fiercely waved his sleeve. "Go back." No matter whether it was an illusion or not, he had to go back and see for himself. Only then could he feel at ease. Outside the holy capital of the Empire of Qin, in the 100,000 mountain range, Luo Qingtong's figure fiercely jumped, avoiding the wall of energy that Elder Xie had condensed behind her. She fiercely rushed into a nearby dense bush. "Humph, you take it with you. Put all these things in the places I marked on this map." Luo Qingtong quickly summoned the little golden mouse from the 9-layer exquisite pagoda. Then, she tied 2 small parcels on its body. Finally, she placed a mountain range map on the little pig's little hoof. This map was a topographic map of the mountain range that Luo Qingtong had used her eye technique to half-heartedly memorize as she ran. There were small red dots scattered on the map. The specific locations were recorded on the map. It was very clear at a glance. Remember, you have to put all these things in. Don't miss a single one. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she raised her hand and pushed the pig and mouse, who had been tied up, into the depths of the bushes. This might be the only way she could escape. Whether it succeeded or not, it all depended on the little pig. The little pig was usually very unreliable, but at this time, Luo Qingtong could only trust it. She was being chased by Elder Xie. It was impossible for her to free time to do those things. Of course, Elder Xie wouldn't let her take them. This time was different from the last time when she dealt with Silver Swords Group. At that time, Luo Qingtong was prepared in advance. But now, if she dared to do anything in front of Elder Xie, he would definitely find out. "Hey, what's this?" Little Pig stared at the map in his hoof and the small package on his body. "Woman, don't tell me you're thinking of using the move you used on the Silver Sword sect? I'm telling you it won't work. This Elder Xie is a Saint Transcendence expert. No matter how many beasts there are, they can't do anything to him. And there are no sacred beasts in this mountain range." In the end, this was the mountain range near the holy capital of the Empire of Qin. Sacred beasts wouldn't live in such a dangerous place. Last time, in the mountain range near the main city of the Black Field, there were no sacred beasts in the beast tide that Luo Qingtong summoned. Chapter 11:21. Nope. Luo Qingtong waved her hand at it, then leaped and flashed away. "Oh my god! Let's fight!" Seeing Luo Qingtong leave, Little Pig gritted its teeth and carried the small package on its back. Although it was called a small package, it was actually bigger than its body. However, when it turned around and saw the appearance of the little gold mouse, its heart instantly calmed down. Squeak, squeak. The little gold mouse was pressed onto the package, and its round little butt twisted and struggled with all its might. It was about to use all its strength, but it was still unable to escape from the package. It could only pitifully open its cute and large eyes, and its eyes were filled with tears as it watched Luo Qingtong's figure disappear into the distance. "It's great treasure." "Wah! All right. Obediently listen to your Grandpa Pig, and I'll take you to find her later," Little Pig said as he patted Little Pig with his little hoof. Then, he lifted Little Pig up. "Let's go." The little gold mouse was lifted up by Little Pig, and after swaying left and right for a while carrying the small package, it finally steadied its body. Its 4 short little legs struggled, and when it heard that Little Pig would take it to find the great treasure, its round mouse face was instantly filled with fighting spirit. Its pair of round eyes even sparkled brightly. Squeak, squeak. It wanted to find the great treasure. The little gold mouse stomped its 4 limbs and followed Little Pig's footsteps. 1 pig and 1 mouse ran out with its short little legs. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. When Little Pig and the little gold mouse ran out, Luo Qingtong had already led Elder Xie away. Bang, bang, bang. The latter's attacks came one after another. Luo Qingtong tried her best to conserve the strength within her body, and exerted her eye technique to the limit, ceaselessly moving about in the dense forest of the mountain range. Boom, boom, boom. In the mountain range, the figures of the 2 people, one chasing and one fleeing, ceaselessly flashing towards the depths of the forest. Elder Xie's extraordinary sage aura was sufficient to scare away any demon beasts patrolling in the surroundings. Along with the passage of time, the distance between Luo Qingtong and him was pulled closer bit by bit. Haha. B*TCH. Let's see how long you can run later. Sensing that Luo Qingtong was getting closer and closer to him, Elder Xie sneered in his heart. It would not be long before he could catch her. He laughed heartily, looking at Luo Qingtong with eyes full of lust. When I catch you later, I'll have a good taste of you, and then I'll let you die a painful death. He licked his lips as he spoke. His wrinkled face was filled with a disgusting smile. It was a pity that he couldn't train such a rare talent by his side. However, such a difficult woman was indeed too dangerous. This was Elder Xie's first time encountering a martial emperor who could escape from him for so long. But it didn't matter. Soon, all of this would be over. Elder Xie's lewd laughter was extremely horrifying. Luo Qingtong was not affected at all. She glanced at Elder Xie and continued to move forward quickly. In her mind, spiritual connections were established one after another. 1, 2, 3. Through her eye technique, a huge topographic map of the mountain range appeared in her retina. Following the establishment of the spiritual connections in her mind, one red after another appeared on the topographic map of the mountain range in her eyes. A vague outline of a figure suddenly appeared on the topographic map. At the same time. Chapter 11:22. Elder Xie's voice, which was as sharp as an owl, rang out. Bang! 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 Luo Qingtong's figure was forced to a corner of the stone wall by the qi wall that he had created. At the same time, Elder Xie's figure instantly moved from not far away. In an instant, his hands were like sharp claws, fiercely grabbing at her. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong was surrounded by qi walls on her left and right, a stone wall behind her, and Elder Xie, whose gaze was cold and ruthless, with a perverted expression, was in front of her. She was practically forced into a desperate situation. At this moment, she didn't have much strength left in her body. It wasn't enough to break through the qi walls on her left and right, so she could escape from the side. Haha! Slut, let's see how you escape this time. Elder Xie looked at Luo Qingtong with a perverted gaze. His hand suddenly grabbed at Luo Qingtong's chest. Looking at his movements, Luo Qingtong's eyes suddenly flashed with a ruthless aura. Bas! Just as Elder Xie was about to grab her, at the last red in the mountain range, the little pig was using its little hooves to dig a hole. As it dug, it muttered, "Why in the world do you want to bury these things?" As it spoke, it used its hind hooves to kick the little golden mouse next to it. "Hey, bring the things here." Squeak! The little golden mouse, who was half squatting at the side, hastily opened a small bag beside it and took out a spiritual tool brimming with rich aura. Then, it held it in its mouth, flapped its limbs, and ran to the little pig's side. It buried the spiritual tool in the hole that the little pig had dug. Or rather, it was inserted in the hole. Bas! As the spiritual tool entered the hole, the last connection point in Luo Qingtong's mind was confirmed. In the next second, the huge topographic map of the mountain range was reflected in her eyes. The red dots on the map impressively connected to form the outline of a huge soaring dragon. Pulse raising. As the last red dot appeared on the topographic map of the mountain range, Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up instantly. Facing Elder Xie's attack, she suddenly half-squatted on the ground. Boom! She pressed her palm onto the ground. In an instant, the entire mountain range began to tremble violently. With the river as the vein and the mountain as the dragon head. 4 extremes 8 desolations heaven and earth soaring dragon formation, rise. Luo Qingtong pressed her palm down. In an instant, with the place where she stood as the center, the ground cracked and the stone walls cracked. Behind Luo Qingtong's feet, a huge and sturdy body suddenly appeared. An incomparably huge transparent dragon suddenly rose from the cracked earth. The dragon head was right where Luo Qingtong was. The girl stepped on the dragon's head and held the dragon's horn in her hand. Following the high-spirited roar, it stood tall on the dragon's head and looked disdainfully in all directions. The heaven and earth dragon veins rise. 8 desolations soaring dragon. Luo Qingtong used a formation to gather the mountain aura in the 10 directions mountain range into a dragon and summoned it all at once. Rumble! As the soaring dragon rose, Elder Xie's attack fiercely collided with the power of the soaring dragon in an instant. That soaring dragon was formed from the mountain range in all directions. Elder Xie's claw bombarded its body. The force of the explosion was all absorbed by the surrounding mountain range. Rumble! Chapter 11:23. Plop! Little Pig and the Little Gold Mouse had just finished filling up the hole they had dug. In an instant, they felt the earth tremble. Plop! The pig and the mouse were shaken and fell to the ground. Hey, don't sit on my head. Little Pig stretched out his little hoof and pulled away the little gold mouse that was lying on his head. Holy shit! This woman! He was dumbstruck as he looked at the huge dragon head in the distance. This woman was simply too awesome. She actually thought of using the energy of the mountain range to form a dragon. That's right. Since ancient times, there had been this idea of a mountain range resembling a dragon. Not to mention, this mountain range was close to the holy capital of the Empire of Qin. It had also received a lot of dragon energy and luck from the holy dynasty of the Empire of Qin. The phenomenon of the mountain range resembling a dragon was stronger than other places, and the energy of the mountain range was also denser. My master is too awesome. Little Pig flapped his 4 little hooves and ran toward Luo Qingtong. Halfway through, he suddenly felt that he had forgotten something. When he turned around and saw the little gold mouse was still spinning around dizzily, he immediately rolled his eyes and ran back. So troublesome. As he spoke, he lifted one of his little hooves and threw the little gold mouse onto his body. Then, he spread his 4 hooves and ran toward Luo Qingtong. At the same time, Bei Qing and the others, who had followed Elder Xie's attack into the mountain range, also felt the intense tremors in the depths of the mountain range. Let's go! Let's quickly go and take a look. Feeling the powerful aura spreading in the air, the faces of the few people instantly hardened, and they hurriedly rushed over. Rumble! In the depths of the mountain range, Luo Qingtong controlled the mountain range to transform into a dragon. After blocking Elder Xie's attack, she suddenly slapped the dragon's horn. Roar! The huge transparent dragon head instantly rose up. After a long and resounding roar, the huge dragon formed by the energy of the mountain range completely rose from the ground. Then, with a sweep of its tail, the entire body of the dragon swept towards Elder Xie, who was still in shock. Bang, bang, bang! When Luo Qingtong controlled the dragon to make such a move, in the surroundings of the mountain range, the spirit tools that the little pigs and little gold mice had dug and buried in the pits had shockingly exploded one after another and shattered into powder. The spiritual qi inside was exhausted, and all of it sank into the ground, turning into a rich array formation energy that helped Luo Qingtong control this mountain range dragon. Rumble! The dragon's long tail slammed into Elder Xie's body. Before he could recover from the shock of Luo Qingtong's sudden awakening of the mountain, he was sent flying by the dragon's tail. Then, in the next second, that thick dragon body instantly coiled up. Then, the head of the dragon raised up high and bit down violently. Rumble! In an instant, Elder Xie's figure was completely submerged in the attack of the huge dragon formed by the mountain range. As for Luo Qingtong, she had already jumped down from the top of the dragon's head when she commanded the dragon to attack. Bang! She stood on top of a huge tree nearby and slightly raised her eyebrows as she looked at the billowing dust and violent energy in front of her. Master! At this moment, Little Pig ran over while carrying the little gold mouse on his back. Oh my god, that was so cool! This time, Elder Xie is definitely going to die. Let's go back and celebrate. Be careful. Chapter 11:24. Bang! When Little Pig's voice rang out, Luo Qingtong's sharp intuition also detected the terrifying killing intent behind her. Boom! She quickly dodged to the side. In the blink of an eye, the huge tree she was standing on was blasted into pieces. Luo Qingtong's long hair fluttered in the air as she suddenly knelt down on the ground in a half-kneeling position. She raised her head and saw Elder Xie's figure appear in the area where the dragon was violently attacking. Elder Xie was in an extremely sorry state. His robe was almost torn to shreds and hung on his body in tatters. His entire body was covered in dust and his hair was completely charred. He looked no different from a beggar. However, although Elder Xie was in a sorry state, the aura around him was even stronger than before. Slut! Elder Xie looked at Luo Qingtong as if he wanted to eat her alive. He had been accumulating strength for many years and was waiting for the right time to break through to the Saint's sovereign realm. This way, he could consolidate his realm and it would be more beneficial for his future advancement. But now, under the attack of the dragon, he had no choice but to use so much of his stored strength to forcefully break through the barrier between the Saint's sovereign realm and the Saint's sovereign realm. Although he was fine, he had completely cut off his path of advancement. Just based on this point alone, he wouldn't be able to vent his hatred even if he ate Luo Qingtong alive. This slut! This slut! Elder Xie's anger reached the heavens. At this moment, he didn't have the slightest bit of romantic feelings for Luo Qingtong. He wanted to capture Luo Qingtong and use the most vicious and sinister method to torture her to death. Only then would he be able to vent the hatred in his heart. Ah! Elder Xie roared furiously. In the next second, he suddenly flew up. Like a vulture, he opened his sleeves and attacked Luo Qingtong. Elder Xie didn't hold back in this attack. The strength of a Saint Sovereign Realm expert was revealed without a doubt. Although using the strength of a sage expert to deal with a martial emperor girl was really too much of a waste of talent. However, Elder Xie had suffered so many losses at the hands of Luo Qingtong. It was impossible for him to treat her as an ordinary martial emperor. Which martial emperor realm expert could escape from his hands one after another? And which martial emperor realm expert could make him so miserable? He would use all his strength to capture this woman and not give her any chance to escape or fight back. At this moment, Elder Xie had already treated Luo Qingtong as an expert of the same level as him. This woman was too cunning and had too many strange tricks up her sleeves. Rumble! The power around Elder Xie was extremely violent. From the moment he leapt up, the waves of energy extended from where he was, causing the surrounding air to tremble violently. The surrounding mountains were also trembling. Ravines and crevices were formed. Countless boulders and trees began to collapse under the tremors. Around Luo Qingtong, countless spiritual energy condensed into a domain, enveloping the space around her. Saint's sovereign realm, condensing spiritual energy into a domain. In the Saint domain, all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had to listen to his orders and be controlled by him. Others couldn't snatch it. Buzz! As soon as the Saint domain appeared, all the spiritual energy around Luo Qingtong froze, imprisoning her inside. Slut, let's see how you're going to run now. Elder Xie's face was full of malevolence. He appeared in front of Luo Qingtong in an instant and grabbed her fiercely. Chapter 11:25. Scram! An incomparably cold voice resounded through the sky. As this voice sounded, in an instant, the entire mountain range and even the air trembled violently. The spiritual energy that had been imprisoned around Luo Qingtong instantly boiled up. Then, bang, bang, bang. Countless violent sounds rang out. In an instant, the sacred domain that froze the space around Luo Qingtong shattered. What? Seeing this scene, Elder Xie's eyes suddenly widened. His hands were still in the posture of grabbing Luo Qingtong, but the expression on his face was horrified to the extreme. A single voice was enough to shatter his Saint domain. How strong was the other party? Could it be a powerhouse above the Saint realm? But how could there be such a powerhouse in the true Spill continent? This place was simply... Wait! Suddenly, Elder Xie seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes widened. His bulging eyes looked as if they were about to pop out of their sockets at this moment. There was someone who could do this. But how could it be? How could the other party inexplicably attack him? Just as Elder Xie was horrified, Luo Qingtong's eyes suddenly lit up. She recognized the voice. Yi Qianxian. She was about to turn around when a man's voice rang in her ears. Don't worry about me. This Elder Xie, how did he deal with you before? Bully him back for me. Behind her, Yi Qianxian stood in the air, wearing a silver robe, looking down at the 9 heavens. Listening to the man's domineering words, Luo Qingtong's eyes instantly curved. Her figure leaped up in an instant. In the next second, the life and death dual polarity sword appeared in her hands. Heaven battling art. Luo Qingtong fiercely slashed out with her sword. Elder Xie, who was still immersed in his shock, didn't notice it and was immediately sent flying. Bastard! Elder Xie smashed onto the ground with his face covered in dust. His originally distressed appearance became even more unbearable. A dignified saint master was sent flying by a martial emperor. Shame and humiliation caused Elder Xue's body to tremble violently. He slammed the ground with a bang and was about to fly up to teach Luo Qingtong a lesson. However, just as he was about to move, an extremely terrifying pressure descended on his body, ruthlessly suppressing the power that was about to overflow from his body. Elder Xue was unable to use his power and was suppressed instead. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Ming Zun. He looked at the silver-robed man who appeared behind Luo Qingtong in shock. His expression was extremely shocked. How? Why did Ming Zun suddenly attack him? Before Elder Xue could come back to his senses, boom! Luo Qingtong's next sword light arrived. In an instant, he was like a huge rubber ball. With a boom, he was sent flying by Luo Qingtong's sword light again. Bang bang bang. The sword light in Luo Qingtong's hand slashed out again and again. Old dog, did you have fun chasing me just now? Luo Qingtong's smile was indescribably evil and enchanting. However, the gaze in his eyes was extremely cold and callous. She remembered all the words that Elder Xue had said before. He wanted to snatch her treasure and train her by his side? She was going to grant him his wish. Chapter 11:26. Boom, boom, boom. Luo Qingtong's sword light bombarded Elder Xue's body. Each of the sword lights slashed him into the sky and smashed him down. The defensive strength of a sacred expert prevented Elder Xue from suffering any injuries. However, the humiliation and embarrassment in his heart were indescribable. He was a sage master, but he was beaten up like this. The one who beat him was a young girl in the martial emperor realm. Elder Xue was going crazy with anger. However, he could not fight back at all. Ming Zun! He struggled and shouted in Yi Qianxian's direction while Luo Qingtong was attacking. I am an outer elder of Celestial Palace. This Luo Qingtong stole our precious beast, the gold-seeking hamster, and many of our treasures. Ming Zun, are you going to help this woman deal with our Celestial Palace? Elder Xue did not know why Yi Qianxian suddenly appeared to help Luo Qingtong. However, now that he had moved out of Celestial Palace, Yi Qianxian should have some scruples, right? After all, it was not worth it for Yi Qianxian to go against Celestial Palace for such a young girl, right? However, just as he spoke, Yi Qianxian's voice sounded, which made him completely dumbfounded. My woman would not do such a thing. Moreover, even if she did, it is not up to others to teach her a lesson. Yi Qianren's figure was in the air as he stared coldly at Elder Xue who had been sent flying. The latter was already stunned by his words. Woman? His woman. Elder Xue's eyes widened to the extreme. He looked at Luo Qingtong in front of him in disbelief, then looked at Yi Qianxian who was high in the air. He could not believe what he had heard. Luo Qingtong was Yi Qianxian's woman. Wasn't it said that Blackfield's Ming Zun was infatuated with evil Dr. Gui Tong, that legendary young man? How could it be Luo Qingtong again? Wait. Thinking of this, Elder Xue's body suddenly stiffened. Luo Qingtong. Evil Dr. Gui Tong. He quickly connected the two of them in his mind. When he thought of the various methods Luo Qingtong used to avoid his attack, he was shocked to the extreme. You are evil Dr. Gui Tong. Luo Qingtong looked at him indifferently. She did not speak. She just waved her hand. Another sword light. Bang! This time, Elder Xue's entire body was smashed into the ground, leaving only his head above the ground. Coincidentally, there was feces from an unknown demon beast. Elder Xue's body was smashed into the pile of feces, and his head was stuck in the pile of feces. Elder Xue was on the verge of collapse. Bitch! Kill me if you have the ability. I'm afraid you can't kill me. After knowing Luo Qingtong's identity, Elder Xue did not have any hope in his heart. His eyes were bloodshot. If not for the Blackfield's Ming Zun, what do you think you can do to me? Bitch! Bang! Luo Qingtong raised her hand and sent him flying again with a heavy sword light. Looking at Elder Xue, who was lying on the ground, she laughed coldly. If not for the Celestial Palace, what do you think you can do to me? Don't say I didn't give you a chance. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. She looked at him coldly and said carelessly. I asked the Lord to imprison your strength. You can only keep that sacred region. Chapter 11:27. Before Elder Xie could say anything, Bei Qing and the rest were shocked by Luo Qingtong's words. No! The city master of the Black Field of the Empire of Qin quickly said, Lord Evil Doctor, don't be provoked by his words. He has sealed all of his strength and power. As long as the sanctuary is around, no one can break through his defense. Yes. The other experts from the Black Realm who had transcended the saint stage also hurriedly said, Lord Evil Doctor, it was he who shamelessly attacked you first. You don't have to care about what he says. The group of people was extremely angry. They knew what had happened. Elder Xie had taken a fancy to Lord Evil Doctor's treasures. He thought that Lord Evil Doctor had no one to rely on, so he wanted to use the power of the Celestial Palace to snatch it from him. A transcendent sage dared to attack a martial emperor. He even threatened Lord Evil Doctor time and time again. How shameless! How dare he say that Lord Evil Doctor relied on the Lord? If Lord Evil Doctor relied on the Lord, he would not have the right to attack Lord Evil Doctor. As everyone thought about it, they immediately felt that Elder Xie was extremely shameless. However, Elder Xie was overjoyed. Luo Qingtong, is what you said true? Elder Xie was already prepared to die. Yi Qianxian's strength was not his match. Yi Qianxian did not even make a move. His aura alone was enough to suppress him. How could he fight? Elder Xie was disheartened after knowing that Luo Qingtong was his woman. That was why he scolded her. He did not expect Luo Qingtong to be so stupid. She wanted to compete with him just because of a few words? Ha ha ha. If not for the fact that the situation was not right, he would not have laughed and angered Yi Qianxian. Elder Xie really wanted to laugh out loud. Luo Qingtong was really a stupid woman. He did not expect Ming Zun of the Black Field to be infatuated with such an arrogant and stupid woman. But this was good too. If it wasn't for this, how could he have found a chance to escape death this time? Humph! Luo Qingtong snatched the sex treasure beast and had many treasures on her. When he returned to the Celestial Palace and reported to the Celestial Palace, he would definitely make her suffer. So what if Ming Zun in the Black Field was protecting her? Celestial Palace wasn't weak either. Moreover, the forces of the Black Field were not located in the hidden world. Unless Luo Qingtong decided not to go to the hidden world for the rest of her life, there would always be a chance to make a move. It was impossible for the Black Field's Ming Zun to guard her forever. As Elder Xie thought of this, he suddenly laughed coldly. Of course it's true. I never joke. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and looked at his face, which was first surprised, then happy, and finally cold. Her eyes were indifferent, and her heart was pondering. She was waiting to play with him slowly. How could the grudge of being hunted down just now be vented by killing him? Good. I hope you can make the decision. As Elder Xie spoke, his gaze swept across Yi Qianxian. Her words are my words, said Yi Fuqian. The man's gaze was cold, and he was too lazy to look at Elder Xie. He raised his hand, and in an instant, Elder Xie felt that his strength and power were all confined. Not only that, his body's strength was also reduced. This man was simply terrifying. Elder Xie looked at Yi Qianxian, who had confined his strength with just a raise of his hand, and his heart was filled with fear. This kind of strength. No wonder when they left the hidden world, they were strictly warned not to provoke him. However, it was a pity that he did not know that Luo Qingtong was his woman. Otherwise, he would never provoke him. Chapter 11:28. Elder Xie was extremely vexed. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's voice rang out. Begin. Elder Xie's heart skipped a beat when he heard her voice. Then, he hurriedly ran out. Yi Qianxian really kept his word. He only sealed his strength and power, making him as weak as an ordinary person. However, he could still use the sacred domain. Humph. Luo Qingtong, that bitch, thinks too highly of herself. So what if she has some tricks up her sleeve? This sacred domain can only be comprehended by a sage after reaching the Sage Master Realm. It condenses the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual chi into a domain. Even if my strength is sealed, I can't support this domain. As long as I have this domain, It's equivalent to having a sacred domain's protective shield. She's just a martial emperor. How can she break my sacred domain? What a joke. She's so stupid. Elder Xie sneered. The sacred domain was the main means of defense for experts above the sage realm. Even if his sacred domain had just been condensed and was only half-formed, and his strength was sealed, he couldn't support the sacred domain's defense, but it was definitely not something that Luo Qingtong, a mere martial emperor, could break. She was so stupid that she let him go for no reason. Elder Xie was very pleased with himself when he thought of this. He kept running out at an extremely fast speed. However, because his strength was sealed, there was a limit to how fast he could run. Luo Qingtong looked at his running figure and narrowed her eyes. Lord Evil Doctor. Seeing that Elder Xie was running far away and Luo Qingtong still didn't move, the city lord of the Black Field of the Empire of Qin suddenly became anxious. Could it be that Lord Evil Doctor had other plans? She deliberately wanted to let Elder Xie go? But there was no benefit in letting him go. If the Celestial Palace knew about this, they would definitely do everything possible to deal with Lord Evil Doctor. At that time, it would be troublesome. Just as the group was panicking, Luo Qingtong moved at this moment. She saw that Elder Xie was about to run out of her sight. The other party must be feeling very proud right now, right? Was he about to escape? Do you think I'm stupid? Don't worry, she would soon let him know. Who was the fool? My lord, can I have a kiss? Just when everyone thought that she would chase after Elder Xie, Luo Qingtong's figure flashed and suddenly appeared beside Yi Chenxian. She raised her head and hooked her arms around the man's neck. She smiled sweetly and leaned towards Yi Chenxian with a devilish charm. The girl's red lips were burning, like the world's strongest wine, the most intoxicating flower brew. Yi Chenxian's eyes darkened. He immediately knew what she wanted to do. However, he gladly endured it. The man raised his hand, clasped the back of her head, and kissed her deeply. At the same time, he released the defenses in his body, allowing Luo Qingtong's power to enter. Bas! The power in Yi Chenxian's body flowed continuously along with the girl's aura and poured into her body. Boom! Luo Qingtong's aura suddenly soared. His meridians began to ache from the sudden surge of power. Even though she was already a martial emperor, Luo Qingtong still couldn't determine the upper limit of Yi Chenxian's strength. Chapter 1129. This was great. This way, she wouldn't have to worry about not having a goal to strive for and reaching the peak she wanted to surpass. She wouldn't be lonely in the future. This was because she knew that no matter what level she reached in the future, this man would definitely stand there and wait for her. This feeling of having someone waiting for her and traveling with her made Luo Qingtong's heart swell so much that it was about to jump out. She looked deeply at the man in front of her. Then, she sucked on the tip of his tongue. Under his dark and seductive gaze, Luo Qingtong smiled wickedly and suddenly escaped from the man's arms. My lord, that's enough. She licked her lips wickedly. Then, she stood up and flew into the air. Crack! The life and death yin-yang sword in her hand instantly transformed into the shape of a death blade. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. She looked in the direction Elder Xie had fled in. Her pupil technique was quickly activated. The color of blood instantly filled her eyes like a waterfall. Luo Qingtong's red robe fluttered in the wind. The aura around her surged. The power that overflowed from her body caused the space to tremble faintly. The power of the Sage State? The city lord of the Empire of Qin and the others who had never seen Luo Qingtong's abnormal power were shocked. How did the evil doctor's power suddenly increase so much? Where did she get so much power? Only Bei Qing, who had seen Luo Qingtong absorb Yi Chenxian's power to kill the Sage State assassin from the Supreme Assassin Pavilion, remained calm. Rumble! The power around Luo Qingtong's body surged violently. The death blade in her hand was infused with the power in her body, and it instantly extended several meters. Heaven-conquering art. Luo Qingtong brandished the death blade in her hand. In an instant, there was a ray of light in the sky. The dark black sword light in her hand seemed to cut through the night and day as it flew towards Elder Xie. Luo Qingtong's eye technique was operating at lightning speed as she stared at the weakest point of Elder Xie's sacred domain defense. A sacred domain's defense could not be forcefully broken by anyone below the level of a sacred expert. However, Luo Qingtong had locked onto its weakest point. She could use the power of the Sage Realm to break through it. Saying that she relied on Ming Zun? Then she would let him see what was called a true backing. Only she could rely on him. Only she could rely on him. Break! Rumble! Elder Xie was running with all his might. He felt that he had already run far away. When he looked back, he couldn't see the figures of Luo Qingtong and the others. Haha! As expected, Ming Zun and the others didn't chase after us. Even heroes can't resist the charms of beautiful women. Unfortunately, that beauty is stupid. While he was laughing, he suddenly felt an oppressive pressure from behind him. He suddenly turned his head, only to see an extremely fast and dazzling sword light that seemed to have traveled through time and space, flying towards him. What? This sword light was clearly sent out by Luo Qingtong. But how could she be so strong? Elder Xie stared at this sword with bulging eyes. Before he could react, in an instant, that sword light fiercely slashed his body. In the blink of an eye, he was slashed away. Bang! Elder Xie's figure fiercely smashed to the ground. But soon he stood up. Haha! Luo Qingtong, you can't hurt me. Sacred domain can't be broken through by force unless one is a sage master. You. Chapter 11:30. Elder Xie's eyes widened. He looked at the Saint Realm domain that enveloped his body in shock. Ka ka ka. The sound of fragments rising and falling continued to ring out. From the place where Luo Qingtong's sword slashed over, his Saint Realm protection was constantly shattering. Just as Elder Xie was laughing maniacally, the fine lines on it had also reached the end. The moment his voice came to an abrupt end, it shattered with a bang. No, no, no! Elder Xie's eyes widened as he watched the Saint Realm protection shatter. He desperately used his hands to pick up the fragments of the Saint Realm protection. But the shattered Saint Realm protection turned back into spiritual energy, and quickly dissipated from his palms like snowflakes. No, no. Elder Xie's eyes were filled with extreme horror. One had to know that his strength and power had been completely sealed. Without this Saint Realm protection, he was no different from an ordinary person. By then, how could he escape from Luo Qingtong's attack? Damn it! How could this be? How could this be? How could she suddenly launch such a powerful attack? And even if she launched a Saint Realm attack, how could it break his Saint Realm protection? Elder Xie was about to cry. He didn't have the thought of crying when Yi Qianxian appeared, and he also didn't have the thought of crying when Luo Qingtong hit him like a rubber ball. At this moment, he really wanted to cry. If he had known that this Luo Qingtong was so abnormal, he definitely wouldn't have provoked her. He definitely wouldn't have. At this time, Elder Xie knew what was called deep regret. Luo Qingtong gave him the last hope of survival, but she ruthlessly destroyed it. This was more painful and unbearable than the despair he felt at the beginning. Bang! Just as he couldn't help but cry bitterly, Luo Qingtong's next sword light blasted and directly cut off his head. Luo Qingtong wouldn't allow a powerhouse like Elder Xie to have any chance to turn the tables. Otherwise, there would be no end of trouble. The reason why the other party had failed this time was because he had underestimated the enemy too much. If he had used all his strength at the beginning, he would not have had the chance to activate the Empire Protection Magic Array of the Imperial Palace of the Empire of Qin, let alone leave it. It was Elder Xie's underestimation of the enemy that gave her the chance. But Luo Qingtong couldn't give others the same opportunity. Bang! Elder Xie's corpse fell heavily to the ground. His power spread out. A translucent soul body instantly emerged from his body. Luo Qingtong flew over at this moment. Her eyes lit up when she saw this. Who would have thought that Elder Xie would directly become a ghost after his death? It seemed that he must have practiced a soul cultivation technique before. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong waved her hand and summoned the 100 Ghost streamer from her ring. Ah! The translucent soul of Elder Xie was instantly absorbed by the 100 Ghost streamer. At the same time, Luo Qingtong took out the heart of the 1,000-year soul guiding wood and absorbed all the death energy around Elder Xie. In the future, these would be her trump cards against her enemies. After putting these two things away, Luo Qingtong turned around and prepared to find Yi Qianxian and the others. However, just as she turned around, a man's figure appeared beside her. Should we talk about the kiss just now? Chapter 1131. What do you mean by enough? Yi Qianxian pressed her against the tree trunk. His tall figure directly enveloped Luo Qingtong's petite figure. The man narrowed his eyes and looked at her dangerously. This sovereign still doesn't think it's enough. As Yi Qianxian spoke, he suddenly lowered his head and kissed Luo Qingtong's lips. Luo Qingtong wanted to say something, but her lips were sealed by the man at this time. Her eyes curved as she looked at the man's handsome face magnified in front of her. She immediately raised her hand, hooked the man's collar, and kissed him back. That kiss was deeper and more intense than Yi Qianxian's. How is it? Is it enough this time? The two separated their lips with a long silver thread. Luo Qingtong licked her red and swollen lips. She chuckled and asked seductively. Yi Qianxian looked at the tip of her pink tongue licking her lips. The light in his eyes dimmed even more. The dark waves in his eyes seemed to want to swallow Luo Qingtong whole. What if this sovereign says it's still not enough? He raised his hand and gently rubbed Luo Qingtong's red and swollen lips with his index finger. His coarse fingers slowly moved around on it, rubbing it. The man's gaze was deep, and he deeply seized her. It's still not enough. Luo Qingtong looked at the man in front of her with a wicked smile. She opened her mouth slightly. Yi Qianxian's finger sank into her lips, as if she was holding it. The girl's warm breath and soft touch, as well as her soft and fragrant tongue, made Yi Qianxian's gaze darken in an instant. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded not far away. Master, Master, look what I found. Ow. Little Pig ran over while carrying the little golden mouse on his back. Just as he saw Luo Qingtong, he didn't even have time to be happy before he came face to face with Yi Qianren's dark face. He saw Yi Qianxian pressing Luo Qingtong against the tree trunk, then saw Luo Qingtong's ambiguous action with Yi Qianxian's finger between her lips, and his eyes instantly darkened. Oh my God! I came at the wrong time. I'm dead. Little Pig instantly cried out anxiously when he saw that he had obviously interrupted Yi Qianxian's good time. His 4 hooves flapped as he tried to stop his footsteps and ran back. However, the little golden mouse on its back didn't see anything wrong with the scene in front of him. Seeing its treasure in front of it was right in front of its eyes, Little Pig happily pounced towards Luo Qingtong. Squeak, squeak. The little golden mouse's 2 little claws fluttered and hugged the hem of Luo Qingtong's dress. After tugging on the young girl's red dress a few times, it suddenly scurried onto her shoulder. Squeak, 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 squeak. Great treasure! Great treasure! The little golden mouse happily squatted on Luo Qingtong's shoulder and used its round little head to rub against Luo Qingtong while acting cute. It even used its 2 little claws to hug Luo Qingtong's face. Ha ha ha! Luo Qingtong looked at the little golden mouse on her shoulder that kept acting cute, then looked at Yi Qianxian's dark face that was about to drip water. She couldn't help but laugh. She raised her head and kissed the man on the lips. Then she couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yi Qianxian fiercely ground his teeth when he saw her laughing so hard that she was convulsing. Then, he fiercely pulled her into his arms and bit her lips with neither too much nor too little strength. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.